unless you're asked to speak. If you've got any points that you wish to raise at any point, if you can use the raise your hand function, and then we'll come to you. It takes a bit of a while, it's a bit of a juggling act to mute the speaker and sort everything out this end. So if you can wait a second before you start speaking on Teams, that would be great. So if we get started, we haven't had any apologies for absence. And now we'll get on to the nomination of the chair. Has anyone got any nominations? Oh, okay. Councillor, Councillor Jeffries, Councillor Allen, Councillor Rice. Who would you like to nominate?
Sorry, I'd like to nominate Councillor Massey.
Are there any other nominations?
I'd also like to nominate Councillor Massey, please.
Councillor Muldowney?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Rice, please.
Okay, so if we take a vote, Councillor Massey. Just to double check, there's no votes on Teams for Councillor Massey. Councillor Rice. Oh, Councillor Spillman, can you hear okay?
I can now.
Yeah, I was having trouble as well.
I was having trouble as well.
But you can all hear okay now?
Yeah,
I couldn't hear the vote.
Same here.
So that was a vote for Councillor Massey. So there were 3 votes for Councillor Massey. Were there any more on Teams?
Councillor Piccolo for Councillor Massey.
Councillor Spillman for Councillor Massey.
Councillor Spillman, was that a vote for Councillor Massey? So that was 5 for Councillor Massey, and then votes for Councillor Rice, please. 1, 2. Any votes on Teams for Councillor Rice? Yep, so that was Councillor Muldowney, so that was 3 for Councillor Rice. So therefore that's 5 for Councillor Massey, 3 for Councillor Rice. So Councillor Massey becomes chair. And then we'll move on to the nominations for vice chair. Any nominations for vice chair? So is everyone happy for Councillor Rice as vice chair? Yep. Happy for that?
Yeah, agreed.
Everyone on Teams happy for that?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so then if Councillor Massey and Councillor Rice would like to go up to the top table, yeah, is that all right with everyone?
Thank you. I'd like to take a moment to thank Councillor Spillman, Councillor Rice for their hard work, good points of view and questions. I'm sure they'll continue to do so. And moving on to the minutes, agenda item 4. So the minutes of the meeting held on 16th of March 2020. Lucy, do you have any comments regarding those minutes?
I haven't received any comments, unless anyone's got any.
I'll put it on. Yeah, just to point out the fact that my name was missed off the list of attendees in the minutes.
Yeah, I can rectify that, Robert.
Any comments on Teams?
Councillor Spillman, you've got your hand raised. Is that for comments on on minutes? Or... Councillor Spillman, you're on mute at the moment, sorry.
Sorry, I'm having a nightmare here. Sorry, apologies. All good.
Are those minutes being accepted as accurate? Those minutes accepted as accurate on Teams? Thank you. Those minutes have been agreed. Moving on to agenda item 5, urgent items of urgent business. I haven't received any. So moving on then to item 6, declaration of interest. Does anyone have any interest in the clearance of the chamber? Any declaration of interest on Teams? Moving on quickly then to agenda item 7, terms of reference for the task force. You can find this, just find it, page 13 on the agenda. Does anyone want to make any comments on the terms of reference? Just to double check on Teams, anyone wants to make any comments? Councillor Allen.
Chair, can I just question the on the membership is with the free Thurrock independence? Does that still stand?
So it was supposed to be discussed at full council, but it wasn't. So the next full council, it'll all be amended like that, so that there will be 3 independents.
Thank you, Lucy. Anyone else any comments on the terms of reference?
Councillor Muldowney?
Sorry, I was going to bring up the same thing. That was my question before Councillor Allen pitched in.
Okay, then moving on to agenda item 8. This is to receive a presentation from Highways England on the Lower Thames Crossing design consultation. I'll hand over to Lucy.
Highways England, are you ready to share your screen and give your presentation?
Yes.
Yeah,
Are you
ready.
able
to... can you see that all right?
I can, yes, absolutely. Hopefully everybody else can.
Yeah, we can all see in the chamber.
Excuse me. Have you got a password for the to link to the that site?
1 second, Phil. We're just trying to get the presentation.
While we're waiting for that, shall I take the opportunity to introduce myself? while that's being worked up. My name is Gareth Prothero, work for Cascade. I am the Development Director for Cascade.
One second, Phil. Sorry, could you start that again? We were just having some trouble with the presentation, but I think we've got you now.
Wonderful. Okay, I was just killing a bit of time and while I was going. So, but no worries. Yeah, I was going to say I was going to introduce myself. My name is Gareth Prothero. I work for Cascade. I am the Development Director for Cascade, which is effectively supporting Highways England to take the scheme up to the publication, so the application of the DCO, and then through the examination phase, and hopefully out the other end. We've got a presentation for you tonight that we'll run through, and I think it's probably, if everybody's okay, I think it's probably best if we wait until the end of the presentation and pick up the questions. Because of the number of people on Teams, it can get a little bit confusing if we try to run through questions as we go. So if everybody's happy with the way in which we'll work. Okay, thanks, Phil. Okay, this is just to give you a bit of a idea what we're going to be talking about tonight. Obviously, focus primarily on the design refinement consultation, and going to give a very quick overview of the refinements of what's changed, and then really, key part of this is we're in a consultation, and really want to get your response back. I wasn't in the last task force session. I've looked at the minutes, and clearly I understand that there's there's not a huge deal of support for the scheme in its current format from yourselves. So when I use words like in the presentation, there's an improvement, there's benefits. I'm doing that in the background of comparing it to the previous supplementary consultation, as opposed to the sort of anything else. Okay, and then we'll have a question and answer session. Junctions there, the A2, M2 in the south, the A13, A1089, and the M25, and we'll make a massive improvement in terms of improving congestion around the Dartford crossing, and we'll nearly double the capacity across the Thames to the east of London. And one of the key drivers of this scheme is really to support economic growth, both local development and regional economic growth, and open up this. Open up the market, and certainly we see this as sort of twofold, really. The first opportunity is doing in the construction phase, in terms of the local support that will be needed, and then obviously, as I said, the wider opportunity is in the longer term for the strategic growth. So, focusing on our design refinement consultation, we're proposing a number of refinements to the design of the Lower Thames crossing based on feedback received during the previous consultations, engagement with our stakeholders, and ongoing design work. We now have a better understanding of some of the technical strengths, in particular around the utilities. So what we're proposing, and is currently in our consultation, we have a reduction in the overall size at the development boundary, and I'll go into detail a little bit more on this. Minor changes to the highway design. We're not fundamentally changing junctions. We're not introducing more links or removing links. They really are relatively minor changes to the highway design. We've now completed our strategy in terms of pedestrians, cyclists, and horse riders, and we have a far better understanding of what utilities diversions are required. In the supplementary consultation, because of where we were with the design, both how we designed the utility design, there were some options. We've now narrowed that down, so we got far fewer utility diversions. And the last 2 points there, our environmental master plan has now been completed and includes our landscaping and the completion of our ecological mitigation measures. So that's predominantly what the design refinement consultation is. Sorry, next slide, Phil. Obviously, we're in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic, and on just about everybody really. As a result, you know, and there's obviously post and telephone facilities as well for those without access internet. Next slide, please, Phil. If obviously you can see that see the figures there. Overall, we got a reduction in the development boundary, predominantly by completing the preliminary design of the utility diversions, and that's taken our development boundary down from 26.2 square kilometres at the supplementary consultation, down to 22.89 in the design refinement consultation. Number of properties affected was 270 at the supplementary consultation. That's now reduced down to 150. And the overhead electricity works, again, we had 190 out of 270 stats works. That's now 70 out of 50. So again, an improvement, I believe an improvement there. And the number of properties requiring demolition, you know, and I'll say this, you know, any property that requires demolition is significant. It has a huge personal impact on those that aren't impacted. So as a result, we've looked to reduce where we can. And for a scheme of this size, demolishing 40 properties, as I said, for the people involved, I understand it's a huge issue, but requiring only 40 properties for a scheme of this length is a relatively small number. With regards to the land take, we've obviously got certain land for gas pipelines where we'd normally use the land temporarily, but we're retaining permanent rights over it to allow the utility owner to operate and maintain the infrastructure. And other areas like construction sites will only be needed temporarily, with any land being reinstated and returned to its original owner once the construction is complete. So those figures are contained within that design refinement consultation land take figure. Next slide. And now we're going to focus on the environmental impacts. And again, the first 2 points are positive in terms of the ancient woodland. You know, following consultation from our supplementary feedback, from our supplementary consultation, we've been able to refine the land required for utility diversions, as I said, and in doing so, we've been able to reduce the impacts on various woodland areas, in particular around the M2A2 junction in the south. Green bridges. We've improved the landscaping proposals, and these have resulted in better opportunity for ecological connectivity at many of the green bridges along the route. And that's fed into our environmental master plan. And we now have completed our noise modelling. So we've now got an additional, because that work is now complete and we understand what it is that we need to do, we've now got an additional 70 noise barriers along the route. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in terms of what's in the north further in the presentation. If I could move on to the next slide of the landscape. As we've progressed the design of Lower Thames Crossing, we've also developed a more detailed landscaping proposals to mitigate the visual impacts of the project's above ground infrastructure. Since supplementary consultation, we've added more detail on the specific type of ecological mitigation proposed across the route, such as grassland, woodland, and further detail around watercourses. We've also provided new landforms and viewpoints, which is slide covers. Okay, thank you. In terms of utilities, as it says, there's a number of small permanent substations, approximately 3 by 3 meters, which will need to be installed across the route. And in terms of those substations, these will be located within an area of approximately 5 meters by 4 meters to allow for maintenance of the substations. The precise number and locations will be confirmed during further design work, predominantly during detailed design and continued engagement with our stakeholders. We've also got another number of large switching stations. Switching stations are used to distribute electricity through a community. The switching station is fed through the above ground or below ground cables and then feeds the power into the substations. The substations then convert the power to an appropriate voltage to an end customer to receive. Both the substations and the switching stations are usually fenced off to protect security. We've also got refinements to proposals to connect water mains, providing the supply for the tunnel boring machines, both water and electric. Where possible in sensitive locations, we'll use trenchless technology to allow for utility installation. Yeah, no. This is just an introduction, really. We're now going to look into some more detail around the design refinements north of the Thames, beginning with the area near the North Tunnel entrance. I was going to say, actually, there's a slight delay there. There we go. On the screen now is the Northern Tunnel entrance near Tilbury, as presented at the Supplementary Consultation. And now we'll move on to what we're posing for the Design Refinement Consultation. As you can see, there's not a huge difference, and the next slide will pick up on the will headline some of the more key points. So the first one there's a new earthworks proposed to provide wide-ranging views overlooking the Thames estuary. The brand new landform with footpaths will lead up to elevated viewpoints, looking out to the south, east and west from where Coalhouse and Tilbury forts will be visible. And the landform design will be created using excavated material from the tunnel, and the surrounding area will be restored for grazing, agricultural use in keeping with the existing land use. And the utilities, to supply temporary utilities to the construction site and permanent supply to the Northern Tunnel entrance, some works will be required that fall approximately 1.5 kilometres outside of the development boundary, as shown in the Supplementary Consultation. And so now the next slide. On screen, hopefully.
Sorry, just quickly, Gareth. Councillor Muldowney, you've raised your hand. Do you have a question or a point you'd like to make?
Yes, I do. I'm happy to wait to the end of the presentation, though.
Okay, thanks, Councillor.
I don't mind if it's pertinent to the last slide. I don't mind if you want to pick it up now.
It's a generalised question, really. I can say it now if you want.
So I was going to say, if you don't mind, if it's a generalised one, perhaps then if we could leave it till the end, because I may have picked something up. If it was to do with a particular location, I could certainly. But if that's okay with you, Councillor, if we leave that to the end. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's showing the supplementary consultation at Tilbury. And again, if we move on to the design refinement consultation, you'll see that there's not a huge difference. which is just confirming really that you know we haven't done a massive change. And again, moving on to the slides, really, they'll show exactly what we've done. So at this location, you can see the ones that are marked 1 there. We got 4 areas of noise barrier, the varying height from 1 to 2 meters, and they'll be up to 700 meters long, and they're shown there. And then the second part, the walkers, cyclists, and horse riders, 2 footpaths in an area slightly realigned. Footpath 61 has been slightly amended to use more of the existing footpath and to follow the existing field boundary. And again, this reduces the amount of land that would be permanently required in this area. And footpath 200, and there's a slide that goes into a bit more detail after, will be diverted around the edge of the field rather than pass through as it was shown as supplementary consultation, and would connect with the existing footpath. This proposal is closer to the original alignment. So again, not huge significant changes. Utilities, there's a new water supply from the Linford borehole and a local water main located near Fort Road and Gun Hill to provide water to the tunnelling operations and the construction site. And the proposed routes for these new temporary supplies are from the Linford borehole site on Lower Crescent, across Mackingford Road and Station Road to the construction area, and from a water main located near the junction of Fort Road and Gun Hill, running along Cooper's Shore Road and beneath the local railway to the construction area. In supplying the water from the borehole and local water may also need to be sourced from a main located in the southern section of the water main near Fort Road to ensure supply is adequate. These works would involve upgrading the water main and the works along Dock Road and Hume Avenue. The 2 substations are located.
I've got one pertinent question in the chamber that Councillor would like to ask. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the water supply, Gareth, as you've indicated, will be coming from various locations throughout East Tilbury down to Tilbury. Could we not take advantage of using water directly from the Thames?
The short answer to that is we've looked at that, and we've looked at extracting water from the Thames, and certainly it was felt that these were the better options in terms of, one, the water quality and reliability, and also the extraction needed from the Thames. You know, there's the actual tunnel operation itself uses water, but then there's the supply post the operation in terms of fire suppressant as well. And our preferred option was to use the supplies as we've shown there.
I think Councillor Allen has a follow-up question.
Just to come back on that, Gareth, with terms to reducing water pressure for residents, is that a possibility where you'll be using massive amounts of water, which will effectively lower that water pressure for all residents around the area?
Certainly, the one which was the bear me for 1 second. The one that the additional rain main that goes from the southern section of the water main near Fort Road, we're upgrading that water main for that very reason. So we've been in discussion with the water company, and in terms of, you know, we've said we would like to take this quantum of water out of that particular main, and they've said it doesn't have the facility, which is why we need to upgrade that. So that has been considered. Okay, is that okay?
Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Okay, should we...
You ready for the next slide, Gareth?
Yeah, move on to the next slide, yes, please.
Sorry, it's a bit slow.
Sorry, Gareth, just one more question from in here.
That's okay, that's fine.
Gareth, is Councillor Allen again. I know we were talking in terms of water supply. I'd like to ask another few further questions in regards to the noise barriers. The 17 noise barriers, is that on the elevated sections that will come through Low Street Lane, east side of the old power station?
I actually, if we go to, I've got to be honest, I'm familiar with parts of the site, but I'm not as familiar as others would be. So if we could click on the next one, Phil, that may. Phil, are you able to click on?
Yeah, so the noise barrier locations, if I can use the laser pointer on this thing. Can you see that? It's just, oh, sorry, I've clicked through by accident. No, battling the technology. Just a sec. So the noise barrier locations, if you can see my pointer, are here next to Station Road. So this is Station Road here. There's the Tilbury Loop line, just along here. So one of the noise barriers was on the east. This will be up to 2 meters tall. Then as we come over the Tilbury Loop line, we've got 2 noise barriers on either side of the Lower Thames crossing. And these are up to 1 meter high. And then finally, in this area, as the at the intersection with Muckingford Road, there's a noise barrier just here. So this is Muckingford Road. There's East Tilbury Station and Linford. This is the Lower Thames crossing, of course. And there's a noise barrier here of about 2 meters high. Is that clear for you, Councillor Allen?
Yes, thanks very much for that. And just lastly, if I can just slip the last one in terms of an ecological and environmental impact statement, what sort of time are we to see that presented, the impact statements?
Yeah, I can cover that. Obviously, we've presented or we've shared work in progress draft versions of that with your officers. The actual environmental statement itself will be published when we put the application in, the DCO application in the autumn of this year. And that'll set out all the ecological impacts and the proposed mitigation and the reasons why we've done those mitigation and also the noise. So when we submit...
Chair, if I can just come on there, it's Anna Eastgate speaking. Just to clarify, various chapters of the environmental impact assessment have been shared with us in early draft form. Some of them were shared a few weeks ago. The rest of them landed on the same day that consultation started. So you'll appreciate that officers haven't had a huge amount of time to undertake any review or provide any substantive comments back on those to Highways England at this stage.
Yes, sorry, Anna. That wasn't meant to suggest that you've had it a while, and absolutely, some of these have come across quite recently. There's obviously been an ongoing dialogue, and as you said, they're very much a work in progress that have come across, been sent across to officers very recently. Okay, thank you.
We've got another question in the chamber, Gareth, if that's all right.
No, that's fine.
Mr. Robert Quick.
Hi. We have a lot of experience in the local area with noise barriers from other roads, thinking about Manaway and alongside the A13 at Horndon on the Hill. All of these have been totally useless, have no effect on noise reduction at all. What are you doing with these noise barriers to ensure that they are both effective and fit in with the local scenery? Okay,
obviously I can't comment on a success of of noise barriers that you've put in, or sorry, have been put in the locality. But in terms of the picking up on your fitting in with the local community, locality, our landscape impact assessment considers the location where these noise barriers are provided, and that's part of the assessments in terms of what the visual impact is, and if and how that can be mitigated. Some areas it can, some areas it can't. You know, planting in front of environmental barriers, noise barriers, isn't always easy because you need to maintain access to them for maintenance and operational reasons. And in terms of the effectiveness, we would have we have created our sort of noise calculations based on our traffic figures and obviously our land model, effectively our ground model for the road and surrounding area. And we've then assessed what putting a standard 2 metre high timber fence, what benefit that would have. It's normal that there's pre and post surveying done to confirm what the benefit has been realised.
So if that is unsuccessful, is that open for replacement?
Generally, the environment, the way in which our DCO works is looking to work in terms of, we're looking to set our environmental statement almost out as a performance specification. So if we've said that we should achieve a certain noise reduction, then in the detailed design, they will need to design to provide that mitigation. So if we said at a property that it's not being going to increase by a certain figure, then as I said, during detailed design, they'll need to confirm that.
Chair, could I just make a suggestion that, you know, there's quite a lot of people who've got a lot of questions, and at this rate, we're not going to get through the presentation. So, Chair, with your support, I think perhaps it would be appropriate for Gareth to complete his presentation, and then we can move around the chamber and ask questions, because I suspect there's quite a lot. I have quite a list as well.
Thank you, Anne. I was just thinking the same thing. I'm going to allow Gareth to make some headway and progress on this, and then give time for everyone on Teams and in the chamber to ask questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think we've picked up. This is predominantly a summary of what's above. Hope we could move on, Phil, to the next one, please. This is just showing what I mentioned earlier in terms of quite relatively minor changes to what we're proposing to do with the footpaths. I don't intend it to go into any more detail with that. We could move on, please. And now we're going to focus on the A13, A1089 junction. And the first slide is a supplementary consultation. And again, quickly moving on, you'll see the difference between the two. There's you know, and again, I'll cover this later, but there's the traveller side, then there's quite a bit more planting. So moving on to the main issues in terms of change at this location. The traveller site is the first point of interest. You know, we've done some more design work, and obviously from the feedback during the supplementary consultation around the proposed traveller site, then we're now proposing a new site adjacent to its current location with access off Gammonsfield Way. The traveller site will be about 1.5 hectares in area. The same as present, with an additional 1.5 hectares set aside for appropriate access and landscaping design. Now, in terms of design changes, it says there changes to the A13 merge layouts. This is not a huge change. You know, we're not changing much of the alignment. This is quite a detailed. We've looked at the traffic figures and how the traffic's going to get on onto the A13. So onto LTC from the A13, and we've now gone for a 2-lane merge type as opposed to a 1-lane merge type. And the third point there, we've removed the false cut in between the A128 Brentwood Road, and Hawford Road, as part of our design, we checked, and unfortunately we had a watercourse at this location. So obviously we needed to change something. So what was a false cut in? Hopefully you're all aware of false cut in. This is where you sort of create an embankment on the road, so that the road is sort of hidden from a noise and from a visual impact perspective. We're now at this, but one location we're not able to do so. So we put additional fencing in and additional planting to help conceal the LTC. In addition, we're strengthening existing hedgerow to the north of the road and additional planting to help further visually screen the road. Next slide, Phil, please. There's 7 small substations in various areas. Again, these have maintenance tracks to them. The ones in particular, there's one near Brook Farm off Brentwood Road and High House Lane. There's another along Hornsby Lane in the vicinity of Heath Place. Along Hornsby Lane, about approximately 250 metres northeast of Gower Lane, and in the vicinity of Hornsby Lane and Foxes Green, along with 3, one at Heath Road near to Stamford Road, another along Baker Street near to Woodlands Close, and one in the vicinity of Stamford Road and Rectory Road. In terms of the what I used to call sort of non-motorised users, is now walkers, cyclists and horse riders, and this isn't unfortunately on this graphic, but at supplementary consultation, we were looking at the feasibility of a new footpath connecting under the A13. Following the investigations, this has not been progressed due to the close proximity of the A13 and what we felt would be how often it would be used. So as a result, the open space to the north of the A13 that was proposed in a supplementary consultation is no longer proposed because we're not proposing to put an access there. So that's been changed. Next slide. In terms of the, oops, sorry, there's a slight lag there. So there's two separate woodland areas. As part of our woodland planting proposals at the A13, A1089 junction, we've identified 2 separate woodland areas off Baker Street that we would like to look to make accessible to the public. And the noise barriers at Brentwood Road. Again, this is out of frame. We'll cover it down in the slide below. It's worth noting that the noise barrier proposed near Brentwood Road is planned to be approximately 6 metres in height. And this is because we've removed the false cut-in that was there before. So hence the noise barriers needed to be substantial. And as a result, this area has lost visual and noise screening. So we're proposing the fencing and additional planting as a form of mitigation. Move on to Dorset Cock. Again, this is, or maybe not.
I'm showing also Cock at supplementary consultation.
Has it come through on? Has it come through in the chamber? Ah, there we go. Obviously, a slight delay there, Phil. Getting to me. Yeah, this is the Orsacock Junction near the A13 as presented, as it says, a supplementary consultation. And moving on to what it now looks like at the design refinement. And again, perhaps just quickly move on a slide as well, Phil, because it doesn't really, you can't really pick up a great deal. And I can go into more detail on the next one. So there's a gas compound, which is east of Thurrock roundabout along Stamford Road. There's planned for operation and maintenance of a proposed gas pipeline in this area. The facility, including equipment, will be located in an area approximately 35 metres by 35 metres and would include fencing for security reasons. And obviously access for future maintenance will be required off Stamford Road. Some land outside of the development boundary shown at Supplementary Consultation would also be required for these works. So this means that this particular location, the boundary has been extended. And again, there's 2 noise barriers there shown there.
Sorry, can I just jump in quickly there on those noise barriers? You've got them as being approximately 5 metres high, whereas the guide says that they were approximately 2 metres high. Could you just clarify that for us, please, Gareth?
Yeah, I will check. The ones to the south are certainly 1 to 2 metres high, and there's one of the barriers is 6 metres high. I'll confirm this one. I'll need to take that away. Actually, is it on? Can we have a quick look on the
page 58 and 59 in the consultation guide? You've got 14 and 15, which are north of the A13, and they're showing as 2 metres high on the noise barriers, as far as I can see, and you're saying 5 metres by the look of it in here. If you could clarify that, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm having a quick look. Yeah, we'll pick up on that.
Yeah, I think, Gareth, it's and thanks, Laura. I think that's an error in the presentation, but we'll clarify that back to the room. So 2 metres is my understanding of the height there. Apologies for the error.
Yeah, I'm in the same space as you, really, Phil. Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. And I thought it was only one location where we had that 6 metre. So yeah, we'll confirm that. And then moving on to the next slide, please. On the Orsett Showground, part of this site is required permanently for the construction of link roads to the Orsett roundabout and the A13, and we're proposing to move a gas pipeline, and as a result, permanent rights will be required over a limited corridor of land within this site to operate and get access to that pipeline. Replacement site for part of the Orsett Showground is being proposed within our proposed development boundary. It's adjacent to the existing showground and is shown within map book 1 of the general arrangements. That covers it off. Next slide, please, Phil. Yeah, this just summarises really, shows the different emerge layouts, the removal of the shade path under the A13. And the proposed traveller site and the removal of the false cut-in. That's the headlines. Again, moving on. Again, this is picking up the woodland areas off Baker Street would be accessible to the public. Also showing the noise barriers.
Do you want me to take the room through those noise barriers and their locations?
Yeah, I think it'd be handy if you could, please.
So here's the larger one, which Gareth was talking earlier about near the junction with the Brentwood Road. So just to orient yourself, here's the Brentwood Road, the Orsett Cock, the A1089, Chadwell, and this is the proposed 6 metre noise barrier just here. There's a further noise barrier just here, which will be around 2 metres high. One along the link between the A1089 and the LTC North, and that will be 2 metres high. And then looking at the Orsett Cock, so this is the A13, so just north of here, just between Rectory Road and the Brentwood Road on the north side, a 2 metre high barrier here, and then west of Rectory Road, further 2 metre high barrier in this location, and then just at the point at which Baker Street currently goes under the A13. We've got a noise barrier here, which will be around 1 metre high, and we'll come on to these ones in a bit more later. But these are the noise barriers just here north of Green Lane as we get into the Mardyke Valley.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Is that all right?
Any questions on that slide? Okay, quickly moving on. Thank you. I think I've covered most of this on this one. The one is the shared path proposes a supplementary consultation for walkers, cyclists between Great Lane and Stifford Clays Road. And the two there is the at supplementary consultation. We were looking to put a connection under the A13. That's no longer being provided, and obviously as a result we don't have the open space there. Should we move on to the Mardyke and LTC? And again, probably we can probably. There we go. So this is as it says, this is a slide as it shows the Mardyke Bridge across the supplementary consultation, and this now what should pop up is what we have currently, which is the significant only change really is that we now have the structure now has a metre high noise barrier which runs at the edge on the edge beam, so at the parapet. On both sides of the road, and the National Grid would require access from Green Lane for the maintenance of its overhead electricity transmission cables on a permanent basis, and the access will be required during the diversion works for the lines and afterwards for the operational and maintenance. And these works would require some land outside of the development boundary that was shown at the supplementary consultation, and so we've increased the land for the works at this location. We have more open space and can avoid impact in vegetation at this location as well. The next one is a small change in the alignment of a footpath to avoid a gas pipeline. I think that's sufficient on that one. And then the next one is the Lower Thames Crossing M25 junction, as presented as supplementary consultation. There we go. On the left, we're above the near the wilderness, looking towards the junction. On the right, the view is showing the Lower Thames Crossing joining the M25 with Thames Chase in the foreground. And again, let's move on. I'm mindful of time to look at the some of the detail there. Again, this shows two noise barriers in the area. One actually serves as a noise barrier and retaining wall. We're also diverting a water course within the area of the wilderness, and as a result, we're also to do this. We're actually having to reduce the number of some of the woodland plant in this area to cater for that diversion. And we're also currently proposing a utility. Sorry, we're also proposing a small substation. Again, this is one of the 3 meters by 3 meter size off Clay Tie Road in the vicinity of the access to Clay Tie Farm. Thames Chase Forest Centre. Just waiting for the slide to pop up. Is it with you, Phil? Is it?
It's on the M25 junction where we link in. We're showing the Thames Chase. Is that working?
Yeah, no, it is. It's just a bit of a slight lag there. So Thames Chase Forest Centre, we've got a proposed new maintenance access track and a multi-utility diversion. that these are located in the same area to limit the reduction in woodland compensation. And the footbridge, the supplementary consultation is shown there as well, over the of Lower Thames Crossing and the M25. Next slide, in terms of utilities. There's a sewer diversion that may be required from Ockenden Road to St Mary's Lane. This is due to the proximity of the existing sewer pipes to the proposed route and the proposed Ockenden Bridge Road construction works in the area. There's also overhead electricity cable diversion, some above and some below ground multi-utilities within the vicinity of North Road would require to be diverted to facilitate the proposed Lower Thames Crossing route. Some of the overhead electricity cables in this area may also need to be placed underground to avoid the route. So this is just going to recap, really. Number 6 shows the sewer division works. Number 8, the multi-utility works, and the National Grid maintenance access at number 9. On to the next slide, please. So again, number 10 is a reduced woodland planting for the maintenance track, and number 11 is reduced woodland planting within the wilderness as a result of a watercourse diversion, and then 12 to 14, so 12, 13 and 14 are the proposed noise barriers. Most of which they're either 1 or 2 meters high. And then the M25 junction 29 refinements. I'm mindful this is outside your area, so I'll quickly go through what we're proposing to do here, which is predominantly to provide a footbridge to the south side of the A127, so that the non-motorised or pedestrians can get access. Other than that, they would need to go across the dedicated slip, which is obviously unacceptable. There's also we've developed our footpaths and NMU routes at this location, and there's some utilities work in terms of a gasworks diversion near Folks Lane and moving overhead cables to underground, as it says there. And slide 47 and 48 just recap on those two. And so if we can move on to the next slide about the design refinement consultation itself. As I said earlier, obviously we're in a difficult time, in a very different time in terms of continuing with our consultation. It started on the 14th of July and goes on to the 12th of August. We've obviously got our dedicated websites, moderated webinar sessions. There's one for the South tonight. I think there's one for yourselves for tomorrow night, I believe. There's also telephone. There's also telephone surgeries where you can make appointments to speak to specialists, and the consultation material is available online and by post, and you can see the how you can contribute. And please. I'm sure you will. Please take the opportunity to feedback, not just on what we're consulting on, obviously, but anything else that you feel you need covered. So we got an online orders exhibition. It's got some interactive maps there, interactive sort of exhibition boards, everything that you would expect to see in the physical event. We've put there online. Explainer videos that set out quite clearly what you need to do, and access to all the consultation materials, and a link, as I said, to the response form. There's also a telephone surgery where you can schedule callbacks during the consultation period. You can also ring up and request any of the consultation material to be sent to yourself. And again, there's the telephone number there. You can also submit, sorry, I missed that one out. You can also submit your consultation response by phone by speaking to a member of the team. Moderated webinars. This is where we present the scheme, and the attendees will have an opportunity to submit questions from our technical experts to respond to, and these are live events. That I said, there's one ongoing tonight for the South, and a number more following. Being mindful that we felt that we really need to focus on promoting the consultation. So there was a leaflet drop, as it says there, within 2 kilometre radius of the scheme. We went out to the usual sort of advertising, as well as the Facebook and email campaigns and media engagement. Really looking to let people know that this consultation was taking place.
I think we'd like to thank people in the room, as it were, for helping to promote the consultation, as well as Thurrock Council corporately doing so. It's really helpful.
Okay, thanks, Phil, and that was a miss of me not to have picked that up, so apologies for that. And really, we're looking to continue with our comprehensive program of engagement with the stakeholders, community groups, yourselves, land and property owners, those living near to the development boundary, environmental groups, and statutory consultees. And as I said, we know that there's some things that people just fundamentally don't support, and we genuinely welcome any feedback on that. So in terms of a quick summary, if we can move on to the next slide, in terms of where we are and what we need to do. As you can see, I'm not going to dwell on this. The public consultation started in 2016 in terms of the option appraisal, and then the DFT in April 2017 picked the preferred route. October 2018, we consulted on our preliminary design development of that preferred route. The ground investigation started in July 2019 to inform the prelim design, and obviously a sort of ongoing risk requirement for the scheme. In January of this year, we had our supplementary consultation, and obviously July now we've gone out for our design refinement consultation. And subject to the design refinement consultation, clearly we need to firstly, look at all the responses, consider all those responses, and respond appropriately. So I've set out DCF submission is in autumn of this year, but that really is very much dependent upon what comes into that design refinement consultation. If there's something that comes in that we consider and we think is appropriate and we'll need to amend, then we'll do so. And as a result, it's likely then that DCO submission may go back. So if our scheme doesn't need any, we don't think it needs any further amendments, once we've fully considered the consultation response, then we're looking to go out, submit our DCO application in autumn of this year. And some of you will know probably far better than me. That's just the first step in getting consent for the scheme. If the planning inspector accepts that application, then we'll then go into the pre-examination, then the examination phase, where this is an opportunity for anybody to ask, why have you, even starting with the basics, why have you got that preferred route? Why have you then developed that? Why have you done this level of design? What else did you consider? What mitigation is in place? How can we hold the contractors to account for in terms of the design and also during construction? And really during that period is where we'll look to continue to work together to refine the design. And then subject to that, the planning inspector, the PINS report and the Secretary of State reviewing that and agreeing with the findings. The DSO decision and the final business case would be early 2022, at which point the contractors would start shortly after, with a targeted road opening of between 2027 and 2028. Sorry, next slide. Sorry, Phil. And just to give you some headline figures against the supplementary consultation, as you can see there's some pretty big numbers and a lot of interest, as you would expect for a scheme of this nature. 74,000 visitors to the website, almost 6,000 responses. The consultation was extended due to the impact in COVID. We had 17 events completed and 2 telephone surgeries when COVID had sort of and the restrictions were in place. And we had almost 4,000 people attend events. So that's the headlines from that. And now, if I could open the floor to any questions, please.
Thank you, Gareth, and your team for that presentation. I don't think we're quite as thankful for the proposed crossing at the start of the atmosphere in the chamber. What I'm going to try and do to make this fair is to take 2 questions from the chamber and then 2 from members of the task force on Teams, and we'll go back and forth like that. So I'll open this up now. 2 questions. I'm sure there'll be quite a few. Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Chairman. Some of these are just observations. The one thing that concerns me is because of COVID-19 and we're not able to hold the normal consultations. I know you're sending leaflets out, Facebook and the like, but if I look at myself where I live more than 2 kilometres away from the site. There's no local newspaper. If I wasn't a councillor, I wouldn't have received anything in the post. I don't use the local library. So my concern is that there will be a lot of people out there that aren't aware that this process is happening again, and will miss the opportunity. Can you not, areas like Ockenden, Chadwell, Horsett, those big areas that are being affected by this, can not all those residents be written to, giving information about the consultation so that we don't miss anybody? Aside from that, I think Anna probably would be the one that answers that. What are we doing as a council to make sure that we're getting all the residents to apply? Sorry, can I just make all my points? Okay. I'm pleased that you're saving an ancient woodland. I think it was in Kent, I think you said, but sadly not the one in Ockenden, which you've not mentioned that at all. And there is an ancient woodland there. And if you could just clarify what the additional works to the footbridge was. Not quite sure what that meant in Ockenden. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, before you answer that question, Gareth, can you unshare your screen, please, so that everyone in the chamber, everyone on Teams can see the chamber, please? Thank you.
Okay, picking up on the 3 points there from Councillor Jeffries. Obviously, the first one was the effectively the extent of the consultation. Obviously, we've as you've seen from my earlier slide, we've put a leaflet drop to give everybody within a radius of the scheme heads up. We're also anybody that's affected by any of the change. Obviously, we've given 2 weeks advance notice of. And in terms of the just to let them know that the consultation was taking place, and for them to request any materials that they need to undertake that consultation. So hopefully that picks that up. And then the next question was in terms of the footbridge at Ockenden. Was that? Yes, the footbridge was included in our supplementary consultation, and I think, unfortunately, in this presentation, we're showing it as additional, which isn't the case. So it was included in our supplementary consultation. So there was a mistake in this presentation in terms of that footbridge there. So there has been no change to that. And then the third point.
I'm sorry, but on the issue of consultation with residents, as I've just said to you, if I wasn't a councillor, I would not be aware that this is happening because I don't go to the library. I live more than 2 kilometres away from the site, but it is going to affect me. So I really, really am concerned, and I would like you to consider a leaflet drop or a letter to all of the major conurbations that are going to be affected, you know, Chadwell, Ockenden, Tilbury, all of them, so that everyone can have an opportunity to put forward what they think about this design.
Okay. Can I, if I could respond to that, in terms of our design, it hasn't changed, apart from the areas that I've identified that have been set out in the design refinement consultation. It hasn't changed from what they were informed at supplementary consultation.
Chair, if I could just come in there. Sorry, Gareth, it's Anna Eastgate again speaking here. We just need to clarify something. So when supplementary consultation was extended and consultation events were postponed as a result of COVID-19, Alan Saywright, who at that time was the project director for Highways England, wrote to the leader of our council, Councillor Gledhill, and informed him that it was likely that there would be another round of consultation and that residents would have an opportunity to respond at that time. Now, the council, I wrote the letter back for Councillor Gledhill, and I can tell you that I wrote in that consultation letter back that I was concerned that our residents and our councillors would lose the opportunity to comment on matters that were up for consultation at supplementary consultation. And here we are now, and you are making an explanation to members and to our residents that are listening to this, that all that's up for grabs at consultation now is the design refinements and not those elements at supplementary consultation. So I have to say that Highways England has behaved in a disingenuous manner in that regard, because at that point I pointed out to Highways England that you were raising expectations that you would not be able to deliver on, and we were written back and told categorically that that was not the case. So please don't explain to our councillors now that they don't have the opportunity to comment on matters that were raised at supplementary consultation that they don't feel that they had an opportunity to respond to appropriately because of the COVID crisis.
Okay, in terms of what I said in this presentation.
Thank you, Anna. Highways England, please now listen to what's being said. We want our residents to have full consultation, regardless of where they live, because the road is going to affect the way they live their lives.
Okay.
Do you mind if I jump in, Gareth? I think it might just be helpful to show the distribution area.
No, absolutely.
Because some of the areas you were concerned about, Councillor Jeffries, and hopefully you can see the screen now, certainly were covered. So Chadwell and Tilbury has all been covered by the distribution. So hopefully you can see this map that I'm trying to show here.
I can confirm, Phil, I can confirm the distribution area because we had discussions about that, Chair. We agreed with Highways England that there was a 2-kilometre distribution zone from the centre line. That's fine, but I kind of think that's missing the point on where we've got to. So I think from Councillor Jeffrey's inquiry, he wants to know what we are doing as a council to help support this consultation. We've updated the council website. We've done press releases. We will do another press release, but we're kind of limited in what we can do, particularly given that the council's taken a decision during the COVID crisis to suspend its own consultations because of the concern around the opportunity of residents to participate in that at the current time, and particularly given that some of our locations, such as libraries, the council offices, are closed to the general public largely. So there is genuinely a concern, and we haven't actually even touched on the fact that we have poor internet infrastructure in our borough. Even the leader of our council, who lives in the borough, is unable to attend a Teams meeting with his video conference on because it interferes with the bandwidth and he can't complete a meeting. So, you know, I think we will be documenting, we have documented, and we have raised our concerns about the accessibility of this consultation to residents. But I think the point had kind of moved on a little bit to the fact that Highways England had alluded to the fact that we would be able to comment on matters from supplementary consultation at a further round of consultation. And from what you've said this evening, that doesn't appear to be the case?
No, that isn't the case at all. I think quite clearly at the beginning, I didn't say that, actually the complete opposite. I said we would welcome any comments across the entire scheme. And I did not say that it was limited to this. And unfortunately, if you hear that, apologies, because that wasn't the intent. And in terms of your position, in terms of the consultation that we've undertaken, obviously your point is noted there. There's not much more I can say in this forum. I'm sure we'll receive your response accordingly.
Vice Chair, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Chair, it wouldn't be surprising for me to start with the premise that this borough has the M25, the A13, 2 tunnels at the Dartford crossing, a bridge and 2 dock approach roads. It is my firm belief that this proposal should go further east to Canvey Island, which would link up the A130, the A12, the A120, the M11, the A14 and the A1M1. And what this would do, Chair, is take the load off the M25 and stop this rat run, because this is just a sticking plaster solution. It will not bring long-term benefits, because the only thing that's happening to Thurrock is we're having our countryside smashed up. Those are factual. Gareth talks about these barriers. Can I just tell you, Gareth, that in Fox's Green, in Alsett Heath, as an example, the residents are 200 metres away from this road. Now, you propose to run a 6-lane motorway 200 metres, and what you've talked about is a 6-metre barrier. Now, it all sounds very nice, and you can sink the road, but the facts of the matter is people will still have the pollution, and we already suffer, as you're well aware, Gareth, the highest COPD figures outside London, and that's a serious illness, and all this road will do is further increase that position. Now, what I would really like to understand is why you will not put this road, if you're so convinced it's the right thing, into cut and cover, which has been done on the M25 in sections. And I do support what Councillor Jeffries has said. The public do need to be included in this consultation. We have a lot of residents across the borough that don't have internet connections. I would suggest at the very least the presentation that's been emailed to us this evening goes out to every resident in the affected areas, such as South Ockington, East Tilbury, Chapel St Mary, Alsett Heath, into Ockington, and even Malvern and parts of Alsett, so they can actually see how it will affect. And Chair, I would be interested in Gareth's answers. Thank you.
Okay, if I could respond on those predominantly 3 points, which is your belief that the preferred route isn't the best option, and in your opinion it should be to the east at Canvey Island. Obviously, there was a lot of work done in terms of coming up with this preferred route, and the process that was followed would have looked at a number of options, and then the business case for this route would have been decided that this was the optimum solution, and hence that's why a preferred route was consulted on. It was consulted previously, and the preferred route announced back in as I shown in that time. In terms of the cut and cover and the business case, so the cut and cover and the impact on air quality, as part of our environmental statement, we'll need to show and set out exactly what the impact of air quality is of our proposal, and that will be published, as I said, when the DCO application is submitted later this year. In terms of the option for putting a cut and cover, my understanding is that we looked at this as an option in terms of whether it was it had was and this is going to be a motive word when you mention sort of a cost benefit, but whether it was cost effective, and found that wasn't the case. So with that backdrop, as I've said, our environmental impact assessment, and in particular the air quality chapter, will set out what the changes are in terms of air quality as a result of this scheme. And the third point, in terms of the consultation, again, the scheme has been consulted on. We had the statutory consultation, and we've had the supplementary consultation, and in terms of the this particular design consultation, it's obviously we've gone out to a wide network. I believe we've also wrote to everybody original distribution list for supplementary consultation, and asking if they can request copies of the guide, which is obviously gives a far more detailed and probably a simpler view, which we can send them free of charge. So we believe that's been adequate for the purpose of this design refinement consultation. Does that answer your question, Councillor Rice?
Gareth, I understand what you're saying. I disagree with it, but we'll agree to disagree. What I would like to know, Gareth, is with these 6 metre high barriers, are they going down the entire length of Heath Road? And also, are you going to put some of these 6 metre barriers up by the flats of Chadwell St Mary, also the roads that are surrounding it, such as Godman Road, Cedar Road, because all these residents will be affected. And of course, as you go across the other side of Chadwell, you have Courtney Road, and the residents ask me time and time again, what are Highways England doing for us? Because they are 500 metres away. The residents in Fox's Green, as an example, are 200 metres away. Now, can you explain to me, will these barriers be the length of Heath Road and around Fox's Green, etc., and also around by the flats at Chadwell St Mary and around those associated roads?
Okay. Phil, are you able to share your screen and show the graphic again?
Yes, of course.
Gareth, Chair, sorry to interrupt, but I think there's probably some generic questions that we need to ask about noise barriers, because rather than delving into the detail about what lengths and what heights they are at particular locations, because clearly that varies, I think it'd be quite helpful for members to understand some kind of general principles about noise barriers, because I noticed they were ranging from 1 metre in height to 6 metres in height. Some of them were 1,500 metres long. Some of them were as short as 500 metres or 300 metres in length. And I think, generally speaking, my understanding is that the height of the barrier generally correlates to a variety of things, such as the land levels, the road level at that point in time, and that dictates the noise barrier. For example, a metre high noise barrier, quite frankly, is skirting board, isn't it, on a concrete structure? Let's be honest about it. And so if you've got a 1 metre high noise barrier, the chances are that the road is elevated in that section or higher than existing ground levels in that section. Otherwise, a metre noise barrier is about as much use as a chocolate fire guard. Is that pretty much your understanding?
No, far from it, actually. In terms of how we've developed our design and come up with these proposed locations and these lengths and these heights, and as you say, it's built up on a number of things. Firstly, we use our land model, so we create a 3D model of the surrounding landscape and obviously receptors. A receptor is such as a house or someone's back garden where they can hear noise, and then we lay on top of that the actual traffic figures that we forecast we'll be using, the Lower Thames crossing and associated links, any of the new infrastructure we put in, and then we use a WebTag approved software to model what that impact will be. So we first do the model without any mitigation in there to find out what impact that has on residences, properties, etc. And then we design the mitigation to reduce that impact. And if we think a metre high barrier will reduce it down to the appropriate level, then that's what needs to go in there.
Gareth, sorry, a metre high noise barrier on a road at grade with resident properties adjacent is not going to serve any purpose. Please be honest with our residents. The chances of that are pretty slim. The higher the noise barrier, the lower the road is, and the closer it is to residential properties. That's got to be an accurate assessment.
Okay, no. I would say that, but could you please refrain from saying, "Can you please be honest?" Because I'd like to think the one thing I am is actually being very open and very honest. And in terms of a generic response, quite clearly, if you had if the Lower Thames crossing was on a flat road and the land either side was completely flat, if you put a 1 metre high noise barrier in there, it won't have the same impact as a 2 metre high noise barrier, and that won't have the same impact as a 6 metre high noise barrier. But what I'm saying to you is that our model is far more detailed than that, and we model it without any mitigation in place, and we assess the impact on the receptors without mitigation. We then design the mitigation accordingly.
I'm not sure that's explaining it. I'm not sure that's explaining it for everybody, and I don't want to say this to insult anybody, but I don't think that's explaining generally to members, to residents, certainly to me, as to a model that doesn't generally. I accept what you're saying, that there's a process to go through to identify the most appropriate locations for noise barriers. I accept that. But what I'm struggling to understand in general principles, and in the absence of elevational drawings that show, the height of the Tilbury Viaduct with the noise barrier on top, a metre high noise barrier on top of the Tilbury Viaduct, which is about 9 metres in height, is probably good enough, because it's elevated, so the noise is higher up than the properties. That it's a flat open landscape, and it will travel. Noise will travel. It will travel in the Mardyke Valley as well. A similar location, flat open landscapes. But what it's not explaining for people to understand in as simple a way as possible is that point that I made to start with, that generally speaking, a lower noise barrier is required where the road is on elevated sections. Where the road is lower, generally speaking, the noise barrier, subject to the receptors that are around it, I give you that, but generally speaking, noise barriers are higher. And that kind of has to follow, doesn't it? Because it's about protecting receptors from noise. So the closer you are to residential properties, the lower you are in the ground, means that noise will travel further. That has to follow.
And a good example of that is where we've removed the false cut-in. So where we've removed an earthworks false cut-in, and we've had to put a 6 metre high barrier there.
And then there's this question then, isn't there, for our members and our residents, and for us as officers, where we've got great concern about the visual impact of that. So members and councillors in the chamber, just so you know, Horndon Road, A13 widening works, which you all know that is a project that I'm working on in delivery at the moment. There are properties very close in proximity to the A13 widening scheme. At that point, we are putting a 4 metre high environmental barrier. And as a council, we considered that was going to have a huge impact on those residents in that locality. It needed significant foundations to support it. And we're still determining what material it's going to be made of and what it's going to look like. But in terms of visual impact and the impact on our residents, noise barriers of 6 metres high and 500 metres in length, I would suggest is quite a huge visual impact for residents to actually want to live with. But I'll leave that for other councillors to comment on.
Just on our last point, I think you'll find the 6 metres is less than 150 metres in length.
Just answer the question. How long will this barrier be along Heath Road, Fox's Green, Cedar Road, and the adjacent roads, which will be, Courtney Road? Because these residents are 500 metres away from the 6-lane motorway, and Fox's Green are 200 metres. That's what I would like to know, because the residents are asking me what protection are Highways England going to offer. Now, it's a simple question, Gareth. Perhaps we can have a simple answer, please.
Absolutely. Are you able to see the graphic? Is Phil sharing it?
Sorry.
So, for instance, each one of those. Sorry, can you see it in the chamber? Okay, thank you. Excuse me for 1 second. So each one of those noise barriers from 11, 12, 13, 14, all the way to 18 shows the location and the height, the indicative height, and the approximate length. So is that the level of detail you were looking for, Councillor?
Well, I think it would be far easier, Gareth, if I could have you reply to an email, because then at least we'd get the answer in black and white, and I could forward it on to the residents to reassure them that Highways England are considering protecting their health. Okay,
yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Councillor.
Yeah, just on the consultation materials as well, it's worth just saying that the map that we're presenting here, which shows the location and the length and the height of noise barriers, is all in the guide. But of course, happy to revert back to you, Councillor Rice.
Is write to the development director. I'll get Anna to write.
I'm happy to write, Chair. I think we need quite a lot of clarification about noise barriers. I think the potential for visual harm and impact from them is huge. I understand the purpose they serve, but I think the noise barriers is something that we're all quite concerned about, to be quite honest.
Okay, and picking just to respond on that, the visual impact is considered during our landscape section of the environmental statement. So where we have a noise barrier, the full visual impact, and if we can, we provide mitigation. That's all said in that chat.
I understand that, Gareth, but you don't have to live next to it, do you?
No, and I
thought that would be absolutely fantastic. It does sound like it could be a Thurrock wall, really, all the way along the side of this road. As I explained earlier, I took 2 persons inside the chamber. Now I'm going to have 2 people online, virtually on Teams, to speak. Lucian, I'll hand over to you.
Councillor Muldowney, would you like to ask your questions? And Phil, can you stop sharing your screen as well, please? Thank you.
Of course, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gareth. My questions are around consultation. So, first of all, the supplementary consultation, which I think is right to say that many of us here wrote about with quite a lot of emphasis, that we felt it was a flawed consultation, because even though it was extended by 2 weeks, we were in the middle of we're at the start of the outbreak of COVID, where, to be quite honest, everybody's attention was not on a Lower Thames crossing consultation. It was on COVID and how to keep themselves and their loved ones safe, which is a perfectly reasonable response. So just to raise again this point that many of us here, I think, wrote, and many of us feel, perhaps all of us feel, that the original consultation, the supplementary consultation, was a flawed one. For those reasons, my worries are that this one will also be equally flawed, in that it will not be easily accessible for all of our residents, being digital. The phone line number is an 0300 number, so I expect that there's quite a cost to ringing that number. Okay, you know, there are ways of getting, in Chadwell St Mary, for example, our library is not open yet, so there's no way for our residents to request to go in and get consultation materials as they could have done before. And I'm wondering, listening to your presentation, perhaps this was just something that was missed out of the presentation, but for me, what was missing is the last time we had a meeting, Highways England weren't there, but we did go through the consultation, the council's consultation response. Obviously, now we've heard that there were another 6,000 responses on top of that. What was the summary of those responses? What I'm not getting is, how did the last consultation feed into this consultation, if it did? But what were the themes of that supplementary consultation? This new consultation seems to have arisen partly through new noise testing that's gone on. You've answered my question about the air testing, because that was something obviously that came up in some responses. And I now understand that's only going to be published when the DCO is submitted. Even with these noise barriers, it's not going to help our residents who have got COPD and other respiratory illnesses. So we still don't know what's going to be in place to protect the health of our residents, and that's basically why we're here as a task force. So it's quite a serious omission. And also, specifically, I'd like to raise the point that your email, which I triple checked was correct, but there are a number of responses that I know of that got bounced back, including my own, and I had to submit it 3 times before it could actually go through that email. So there are problems with just running a digital consultation. Those are some of the things that we've experienced last time. So I suppose my main question is, I'd like to know, what was the result of the supplementary consultation? How specifically has that fed into these design changes? And how are we going to ensure that the new consultation is accessible to all of our residents, including those who haven't got access to technology, including those that might find the number there actually expensive to ring? And in terms of even, you know, going back to Councillor Jeffrey's point, in terms of even knowing that there's a consultation happening.
Okay, if I could respond to that, Councillor. Obviously, the first one is the, you know, you stated there you believe the supplementary consultation was flawed by the fact that we were in a COVID pandemic. Obviously, your position on that is noted, and as a result, we did extend the consultation period, and we also held some other non sort of face-to-face events where we can. Certainly the government is very much of a mind that subject to the necessary planning approvals, then the response post COVID is very much to keep Britain moving and keep people working and people in employment. So certainly we followed all the government guidelines that we needed to on COVID-19, both during the last supplementary consultation and obviously during we believe we're doing it for the design refinement consultation. I wasn't aware you said there was email bounce back. Was that during supplementary consultation you had email bounce back, Councillor?
Yeah.
Okay, but I can't respond on that, but I'll certainly make a note of that and I'll take that away if that's okay. Then the other question you picked up, obviously you mentioned about people with COPD and the impact. Certainly, as I said, our environmental statement that will support the application will set out what the impact of the scheme is, if there's benefits to the scheme, and any reductions in air quality and mitigation where we don't have reductions, what the mitigation will be, or just what the impact will be. And in terms of the third point, which was the consultation, the supplementary consultation, and what changes have we made? Certainly around, and it was noted, it's in terms of the ancient woodland, is far more noticeable in the south rather than the north, and I appreciate that. But certainly in terms of the impact on ancient woodland, it was what I would call significantly higher in the supplementary consultation that there is in the design refinement consultation. So we've certainly taken that on board. And in terms of all of the consultation responses, we will be again when we submit an application, providing a consultation report that will summarise the results of the statutory consultation, the supplementary consultation, and the design refinement consultation. So that should all be covered off in there.
Gareth, could you just let us know when that's going to be provided then, so that our members have got an opportunity to look at it?
It will be when we submit the DCO application, which in terms of, as I said, we will need to consider what comes up during the design refinement consultation. But if there's nothing new that comes up, or there's nothing that changes our design, that will be autumn of this year.
I might be being, maybe this is the way these things are done, but surely a summary of the supplementary consultation and the responses from that should precede the design consultation, the design refinement consultation. I don't know, it feels like there's a step missed out for me, that we're not getting the summary of the responses from the supplementary consultation before we're launching into a new consultation.
Yeah, Chair, if I could just come in there. I think where Councillor Muldowney's coming from, and I think she makes a very valid point actually, which is that to comply with this process, you have to demonstrate, and the words in the legislation and the guidance are that you have had due regard to consultation responses received. At statutory consultation, there was about 25,500 consultation responses, I think. At supplementary consultation, you've alluded to 6,000 responses, and now we're out back at design refinements consultation now. And I think the point that Councillor Muldowney is making is that how are you demonstrating that you have had due regard to the supplementary consultation responses before you've gone out to design refinements consultation? Because that is the gap that is missing for all of us. And I would agree wholeheartedly, as a professional working in infrastructure, that Councillor Muldowney makes a very, very valid point.
Okay, that's certainly noted, but I'm just going to repeat in terms of the when we submit the consultation report, we'll cover all this. And we'll set out all the findings from the statutory consultation, from the supplementary consultation, and from the design refinement consultation. And our understanding is obviously that fulfills our obligations and under the consenting process.
And it rather comes back to what we've talked about before, members of the task force, which is the difference between what you have to do to comply with the process and put a tick in the box, and actually what the right thing to do is. And I think that's where we will clearly disagree with Highways England. Sorry, that's my dog barking in the background.
I thought you had him well trained to bark every time I spoke.
He was squeaking a toy a minute ago, so thank God he stopped with that.
Yeah, no, I note your comments there. Clearly the extent of consultation that we've had across the scheme, we think is, in terms of in terms of your comment earlier, in terms of whether we think we've just about got over the bar or sailed over the bar, we genuinely believe that the level of consultation that we've had, is greater than the significantly greater than the absolute minimum. But I note that I think we'll probably end up having a difference of opinion on that and the approach that we've taken.
Can I just come back to get a specific answer on how much it costs to ring that helpline?
It's a local phone charge, Councillor Muldowney. Sorry, Gareth, to speak over you there. It's a standard local rate.
Sorry, Councillor. Yeah, did you pick that up? And that's fine, Phil. I was only going to ask you anyway.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any Councillor, does that answer all your questions?
Councillor Spillman, do you have a question?
Oh, yes, I do. Can you hear me? My camera's going berserk, so I'm just going to go with voice.
We can all hear you fine, Councillor Spillman.
Brilliant. Wow, I mean, the further I go into this process, the more I realise what a total and utter sham it is. I sat there with my colleagues in the chamber, and you had your swish PR man sitting in front of us, assuring us that we could have, there's still massive input that we can put into this process, and that fundamental changes, can still be made to this scheme. And Anna sat there with a certain level of cynicism that has been shown to be justified, as always. Now, it's not the size of a consultation that matters; it's what you do with it. And in this case, I think you've said it quite a number of times, Gareth. Your comments are noted, and I think that Thurrock should understand that Highways England are noting our comments. They don't give a stuff about our comments, but they will note them. And we've seen that from the very start. This scheme is almost identical. In fact, it's worse with these redesign changes due to problems you've come up with than it was before. So rather than listen to residents and actually make positive changes to this scheme, you've actually just found problems and had to remove some of the the few benefits and some of the few environmental landscaping changes that would have been positive. So I am absolutely appalled by this process. It really is. In terms of the environment, I actually think that the actual consultation has probably had a bigger negative effect on the environment due to the energy and resources and paper and trees that have been cut down than it's actually seen in benefits as a result of the feedback that people have put in. It's an absolute joke. Now, and my actual point, apart from my rant, my actual point is you've designed a scheme in a pre-COVID world, and that even before COVID there was a lot of talk about peak car, and we could be seeing a fundamental change in the way people work and the way people travel, and yet you're still ploughing ahead with this scheme. Surely with this fundamental change in terms of the amount of people working at home, we should be looking to pause this project to see where we are in the next year or two, because this is the biggest event, people say, since the Second World War. It's going to have fundamental changes in the way that we behave, and yet you're just ploughing ahead with this scheme. To me, it just seems like utter madness.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Spiller. Yeah, firstly, let me apologise. When I said noted, that wasn't intent. The intent wasn't to say, noted, we're not going to do anything about it. It was very much along the lines of, noted. There's a number of points that we're not going to agree on in this forum. Some I'm going to have to take away and respond on. But I also understand that the feeling. The local feeling towards this project, is significant and is very real. So, hopefully I don't come across as dismissive in any shape or form. Now, in terms of the post-COVID and in particular our traffic model, this is certainly something I'm going to have to come back to you on. At this moment in time, as I'll completely share with you. Our traffic model, I'm not aware, considers this impact, and I think certainly that's something that we will need to pull a position together on for.
I will say, can I just follow up
on the traffic model point?
Can I think follow up on that, Anna, please? Is that okay?
Yeah, but I can answer the question on the traffic model because I know the answer to it.
Well, I'll just say that. I travel on. I've been travelling on the M25 to and fro every day since the outbreak. Now, to start with, we've probably had about 10% traffic on it, and we're now only through that bridge. We're up to about 40 to 50% probably. Now, considering that's such a fundamental change in the usage of that bridge, there has to be a major reconsideration of your modelling. Sorry, Anna.
That's all right. I mean, irrespective of the changes in behaviours, because more people are obviously working at home and there's a chance that that's going to continue for the foreseeable future. Highways England's opening year of their traffic model demonstrates the worst impacts in terms of traffic and environmental effects. And the reason it's modelled that way is because they believe that there will be a change in not just behaviours, but a change in the green environment, and more people will be using electric vehicles. So you'll have heard David Manning present at Task Force before, talking about that point, and that position hasn't changed. So the year opening, which is 2027-2028, is the worst environmental impact in terms of vehicles and air quality and noise.
Yeah, thanks for that's correct. As you said, we've made a conservative estimate in terms of what the impact is. In terms of the usage of green vehicles, which has meant that things like air quality, our assessment will effectively be a worst case scenario. Because what we didn't want to be doing was making an assessment relying on a large number of green vehicles and not coming to fruition. So we have considered you could almost term it a pessimistic view in terms of the use of vehicles, and in terms of the picking up on the long-term impact of COVID. As I said, I think there is a piece of work to be done there because at this moment in time, I don't know whether this is clearly there's a 6-month blip there, which has made a huge difference to traffic flows as they stand. But in terms of what difference that's going to be in another 6 months' time or in a year's time, I don't know the answer to that at this moment in time.
So, but that's the main point, though, isn't it? Because at the moment, given the traffic at the moment, there's absolutely no point building this project. Yeah, no point at all. There's no need for another crossing on the current level of traffic. And yet you're going to plough ahead and spend billions and billions and billions and billions without seeing whether that effect is long lasting or not. It just seems
certainly during the examination, I would have thought that this is going to be a key point that will be discussed, where we will need to demonstrate what we've done, why we've done it, and the assumptions that we've made. We will probably get challenged, rightly so, in terms of what we've done and why we've done it.
Gareth, are you okay for time? Because I'd like everyone, it'd be a real shame if everyone has a question and didn't get a chance to ask.
Yeah, genuinely, I have no since the lockdown, I have no restrictions in terms of my working hours, which is positives and negatives. But absolutely, if I'm willing to stay as long as you're happy to talk to me.
Thank you for that. With that, I'll pass it over to two persons in the chamber, please. Councillor Shinnick.
Hello there. I was listening to your presentation and you said to go through Ockenden rather quickly, and there wasn't any mention of any sand barriers around there. Could you enlighten me on that? I have got a second question, but I'd like you to answer the first one first.
Okay. Are you able to share the graphic that shows the noise barriers around the Ockenden area, please? And again, picking up on I think it was Councillor Rice in terms of request for perhaps the extract from our consultation material in terms of the noise barriers. I think that's something that would certainly assist. Has it come up in the chamber?
Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Would you allow me to point them out?
Yeah, we can see the digital in the chamber.
Okay, so we've got South Ockenden just located here, just to help you navigate around this map. There's the M25, North Ockenden up here. So there is one sound barrier just here. Oh, sorry.
I think it's the next slide, Phil, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Gareth. One sound barrier just here. That is 200 meters long and 2 meters high. So that's the only one in the vicinity of Ockenden. The nearest next ones are along the Mardyke Viaduct, just here, the south.
But is that okay, Councillor? You mentioned there's a follow-up question.
Yeah, I mean, can you explain where it starts and where it ends in part of Ockenden?
Could you zoom in, Phil? Is that...
Yeah, certainly. So it's next to the wilderness, the one nearest Ockenden. So this is the North Road, just here between North and South Ockenden. And then if you're driving up north to the right, you'd see the wilderness, and it is just along that strip of the wilderness. If you'd like, I can send you an extract, email you an extract from the guide highlighting that, if that's more helpful.
I think some further information on noise barriers would be very welcome by all members of the task force. I think that's one of the things that's come out of tonight. Councillor Shinnick's just returning to her seat, and I'm sure she'll have a follow-up question for you.
Right, my second question is for the backshots area, the Gammonfield Way. Could you explain, you showed it earlier, but I couldn't really make out where it actually is moving to, the traveller's site.
Chair, if I could just come in there, members of the task force will be aware that at full council last week, a petition was submitted in relation to the two alternative sites that were proposed at supplementary consultation. This site is immediately to the west of the existing site on a larger parcel of land, and it's approximately 350 metres away from the nearest settled property, if that helps.
Yeah, so I'm just showing it here. So thanks very much, Anna. So the orange square just here. So this is Long Lane, just here. The orange square is where the current location of the traveller site is pre-LTC, or at this very moment in time. The relocated traveller site would be just here, just next to it, in this hatched area, as it were.
So it's basically staying where it is.
Yes.
Sorry, it's basically staying more or less where it is now, just back a bit.
More or less.
Yes.
Yeah, it's further.
Yeah,
Bit further west.
moving it. Yeah, moving adjacent to where it currently is.
I think it's important to note, though, Chair, that we've still got concerns about that location.
Quick as the residents' representative first.
Hi, you still haven't explained why we're getting no summary of the supplementary consultation. What particularly concerns me about this, there was a lot of concern expressed by residents near to me about the construction period and the proposed working hours, the number of vehicles, etc. And at the last face-to-face meeting that we had, they were very, your people there were very confident in saying that the reduction in vehicle movements that they had achieved was only the start, and they were working on further vehicle reductions. Now, if that's the case, we'd like to know about that. We want to know what's actually going to be proposed to be going on during this construction phase.
Okay, yeah, I can certainly respond to that. Again, in terms of there's no summary of the supplementary consultation. Again, apologies to repeat the response. There will be a summary of the supplementary consultation, and it will be contained in our consultation report. It will be one of the documents that support our DCO application. And then in terms of the working hours and the movement of vehicles and sort of construction as a whole, we will, the impact of our construction has been based upon a number of, we've developed a plausible construction program that has set out how this scheme can be built. We've then assessed the construction impact of that scheme. Now, we then develop a code of construction practice that is also submitted as part of the DCO application that effectively sets out the constraints that a contractor would have to follow. So that, coupled with the environmental statement, and the environmental statement in this instance effectively behaves like what I would call a performance specification. So in terms of what impact we've assessed during construction, the contractors will have to demonstrate that what they're proposing is not environmentally different than what we've put forward. So anything we have in terms of working hours, in terms of the impact on local roads by the use of construction vehicles and the construction as a whole, we'll report that as part of our DCO application, and then subject to the scheme going through consent. Then during construction, the contractors will have to follow what we've set out during that DCO process.
But we still won't get to find out until you've submitted the DCO.
There would have been some ongoing dialogue with the officers of Thurrock. Again, some of this would have been very early, early emerging information. I'm picking up on Anna's point. Some of it would have come across quite recently, but in terms of when it'll first be in the public forum, it is when the application gets submitted.
I think it's sorry, it's Anna Reesgate here again. I think we have had a draft code of construction.
I think Laura hasn't had a chance to speak yet from Thames Crossing Group, Action Group.
Thank you. I think Anna was just in the middle of saying something, but Chamber probably didn't hear because you were talking, Chair. I don't know if Anna would like to finish, maybe, if that's okay, before I jump in.
If that's okay, Laura, it was just to conclude the point about the Code of Construction Practice. Obviously, members will have heard me discuss before about my concerns about not having authority to sign off the requirements. And whilst we will have the ability to input into the Code of Construction Practice, we may not have the final sign off and say in what goes in it. And that concerns me for the reasons that Robert Quick has identified. We have significant concerns about hours of operation and the months of the year in which they're going to be operating those hours, given that the summer runs, if you recall, from March to November, according to Highways England.
Obviously, as part of the examination process, what we've assumed in terms of working hours and the impact that we've made, the construction impact during that will obviously no doubt be subject to that examination, where the process for confirming that will be discussed, agreed, and hopefully we'll be in a position where what we put forward you'll be in agreement with. And as I said, in terms of the actual impact itself during construction, there's the emphasis on the contractors who will be building the scheme to follow what's been set out and agreed during the consenting process. Okay, sorry, Laura.
Okay. Obviously, sorry, were you talking? Is Chair talking? Right. Sounded like Chair was talking. No? Okay. Obviously, I'd just like to follow on from what everyone else has been saying about the fact that we don't believe that enough attention has been given to people having the right to take part in this consultation because of COVID-19. That was the case in supplementary consultation. It's the case with this consultation. The very fact that you announced that you'd be having a further round before the last round had finished leaves a lot to be questioned. And I know that you keep on giving this standard answer about what response is, but although you may have to report it, at the end of the day, how have you listened to what we've said in the supplementary consultation, and how have any changes that you've made from that been, where are they? Show me in your presentation what in this consultation is a result, a direct result proving that you have listened to everyone in the supplementary consultation. Because at the end of the day, I'm looking through, I've got residents contacting me. Some have had letters in areas like Kelvin Road in Tilbury telling them that they're now affected when I can see no clear reason why. I've got residents that are definitely impacted that have not had letters from you. And if it wasn't for the fact that they actually have found out that there's a consultation happening, would be none the wiser that there are these changes. You've got evidence on your website of the fact that you haven't updated the actual LTC website. There are still out-of-date maps. If you go for the land use maps, the general arrangement maps, they're supplementary consultation issue. They're not the current ones. In line with the map books, the current ones in this consultation, if you look at the design consultation, have actually got errors in them. There are place names that are incorrectly labelled, incorrectly spelt. You admit that the actual map book 3, the engineering plans, were incorrect during the supplementary consultation. All that we're finding when we look through this current consultation material is it doesn't answer questions. It leads to more questions. There are no answers. There are just more and more questions that we're coming up with. And this consultation is rushed again, as we decided that the last one was, because previously you were trying to fit it in between what should have been the time for the general election and all that sorting out and the local elections coming about. This one you're rushing through again. And I think that you need to actually listen to the fact that people have the right to have adequate consultation, and Highways England are not providing anybody with that right now.
Okay. Thanks, Laura. Again, Phil, could we share the slide that shows the land take, or gives the land take in that tabular form, please? To the first point that Laura made in terms of how in this presentation we can demonstrate that we've been listening.
Can I just jump in there? You took 25% last time. The fact you've dropped it by 12 is still a big increase on what it originally was when this idea was first brought forward and statutory consultation. I don't consider these figures to be anything other than you probably added on more last time to drop it this time to make yourselves look better. I don't think that's a direct response. Where are any other changes other than that?
Chair, if I could just interject about the overall reduction in the development boundary. And, you know, I've been subject to technical discussions and meetings with Highways England where it has been confirmed that the overall reduction in the development boundary has been entirely driven by the utilities diversionary works. So, again, I think it's a little disingenuous if you're using that as a justification for considering supplementary consultation feedback, to be quite frank.
No, I wasn't in any shape or form. The point was, could I give an example of where we've listened to feedback during supplementary consultation? And the example I was going to give, admittedly, this doesn't affect the north so much, but certainly in the south, one of the feedback was the impact that the utilities were having on the ancient woodland within the south. So we have now worked with the utilities to remove quite a number of those utility diversions. So we can demonstrate in terms of going into absolute detail. Again, the consultation report will set out what people have commented on, how we've considered that, and what we have done to incorporate that into the scheme. And if we haven't incorporated it into the scheme, why we haven't incorporated it into the scheme. So that will be covered off in the consultation report. Now,
sorry, before you carry on, can I just say then, I mean, that's great if you've taken that into account for south of the river, but what have you done in Thurrock? What have you listened to for the people of Thurrock? Seeing as this meeting is specifically with Thurrock Council's task force, what have you changed in Thurrock as a result of the supplementary consultation?
Like I said, I've given you a response at the high level to show what I've answered there. It's actual.
It's not an answer to my question.
Well, do you mind? I listened to your questions and I didn't interrupt. So if I got no problem, if I respond and then you want to ask a further question, that's completely fine. I'm completely fine with that. So in terms of, and I was particularly interested in terms of, you said there were a couple of locations where people had received letters who weren't impacted. Again, if those people have concerns, by all means, please give us a ring. But also, you said that there was some properties which were now affected, which haven't received any information. Could you please ask them to contact us? Because if that is the case, obviously, I'd be deeply concerned about that, and we'd need to sort that out. Now, in terms of some of the other responses, in terms of what are we doing, clearly we are looking to listen to what everybody has to say, and we have to set that out in our consultation report. And clearly the scheme in Thurrock is not well received. There are significant impacts, and as a result, clearly there's a lot of unrest, and a lot of bad feeling towards the scheme. But still, we will need to demonstrate what we have done during this entire process and be as transparent as we can within the timeframes that we have. And certainly it isn't an intent that we're rushing things out to get this, that, and the other done. We believe, we consider what we're doing. We give, and like we said with the previous consultation, during supplementary consultation, we became aware that there were changes that we would need further consultation on, which is why we shared that information with you at that time. So does that pick up on most of your points? And if there's any other further questions you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I mean, just with what you finished up there, the fact that you hadn't even finished the supplementary when you announced it, you said you realised that you were going to have other things that you needed to consult on. Does that not actually prove the fact that you rushed doing the supplementary because you've actually pushed consultation fatigue onto residents and people in general, because of the fact that if you'd have held off until you had these extra things that you realised part of the way through the other consultation, you could have had one consultation that covered all of it rather than creating consultation fatigue, which is what you are doing by having one and then another so quickly, especially amidst COVID-19 pandemic.
It's interesting because obviously we're being, you know, on one hand, we're saying we're not consulting enough, and now we're being accused of consulting too much. Certainly, that wasn't the intent. It wasn't the intent of trying to wear people down. This design refinement consultation is a far narrower consultation than the supplementary consultation, and obviously the statutory consultation. You know, again, we've narrowed down, which is the normal process that you'd expect to follow on a scheme that's developing. So as information comes in, both statutory undertakers, design information, feedback, you expect the scheme to develop in the preliminary design phase until you come up with what you think is your DCO design, which you think is the optimum design for you to take forward in terms of setting out why we've taken the land that we've taken and why we've done what we've done. Because obviously at the end of the day, you know, we are looking to take people's property, and we will need to set out exactly why we've done what we've done and why we haven't done something alternative. So I think it wasn't a case of constantly going out. It's just natural scheme development that you'd expect on a scheme of this size and complexity.
Chair, if I could just come in there, having promoted 9 DCOs for utilities companies prior to this coming to Thurrock, and having been involved in the objection to about 66 schemes, I think I can speak with a little bit of authority on the point, but it would be usual prior to going out to consultation that you actually provided a summary or some feedback of what the findings of the previous round of consultation was at a high level, not in detail, but as a high level. So, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on this point, because I think actually the way in which Highways England approached this scheme, and we all acknowledge it's an iterative process, it takes time, it's front-loaded, all of those things that the process was designed to do. We can acknowledge that, but I think it's fair to say that there is a level of discontent from all quarters of Thurrock about the way in which this scheme has been promoted. And it comes back to the point that we've talked about members before, about the difference between following the process to put a tick in the box and doing the right thing. And I think we are never going to see eye to eye with Highways England on this, because we have a huge difference of opinion between what the process requires and what we consider as a council is doing the right thing for our residents.
And can I just add as well the fact that the land and property team take an exceptionally long time, considering the pressure and the stress that residents are under to receive these letters. I have actually raised a number of cases with land and property on behalf of residents to try and help get things through a bit quicker. When you're given a number, which is just the general HE answer service number, as we all know, or the general info at Lower Thames Crossing email address, and then you've got to wait up to 14 days. Some residents got letters telling them they're now within the development boundary and are going to be affected. 2 weeks before consultation launched, they had to wait those 2 weeks for a further letter to tell them what was going on, and all that information that was provided to them just created more questions for them. So now they've got to wait possibly up to another 2 weeks for property to get back to them to answer these questions. That's not satisfactory by anybody's standards. I'm sorry, it's just not.
Okay, in terms of the giving the 2 weeks effectively advance notice, certainly that was felt that was the right thing to do based on the current situation, so that people who could request print copies of information could do so. Again, are you suggesting there's a delay in sending that information out for 2 weeks? Because my understanding that isn't the case. My understanding is that every request that came in prior to the consultation starting, the information went out within a day.
I'm actually talking about residents whose properties are impacted. I can give you examples. I'm not going to do it obviously over the public internet now, but I could give examples of residents who at previous consultations have had letters telling them that they're affected. They are still affected in exactly the same way. The changes, including some changes to utilities, actually are very close to their properties, and as yet they have not received a letter from Land and Property to give them the up-to-date maps and information. And there is definitely a delay. And I would ask you, how would you have felt if you'd have received a letter 2 weeks before consultation saying, oh, by the way, your property is now affected by Lower Thames Crossing, but we're not going to really give you any example of how or why it's going to impact you for another 2 weeks. And then when you got that letter, it didn't really give you any kind of answer, and then you have to phone up or email and then wait up to further 2 weeks to get that information. How would you feel, and would you think it's acceptable? Because I and many others do not.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm surprised that you think there's people who, if I understood what you said correctly, there are people who should have received a letter who haven't.
Yes.
Again, outside this forum, you know, obviously with those landowners' permission, if you could please come back to us on that, we will investigate that and come back to you. And in terms of sending the letter out, we genuinely felt that it was in the best interest to let people know that with the current COVID situation, that if a property was going to be affected, which was effectively hadn't been affected before, to give those people notice, so that if they didn't want to do the electronic consultation, they could have the physical material sent to them in advance. And we have had a significant response to that. And as I've said, we've sent out the hard copies to those people, to those who requested it.
The people that have requested it, you're telling them their properties and now are impacted, and you're saying they've got to request a pack rather than you sending it out as a courtesy and to explain to them how their property is impacted?
This is the full consultation pack. Now, clearly the confidential material for each person is sent to them.
They should be sent everything as a matter of course, because their property is impacted, and without that consultation pack, the letters that Land and Property send out are pointless because they do not include the information that residents need.
Gareth, if I can just come in there, this is a bit of a consistent problem, to be quite fair, and it's something that we've raised at every stage of consultation. Even when you receive the full pack of consultation materials, it's very difficult to understand the scheme as a whole, simply because every sheet you turn, the North Point changes. It's very, very confusing. And, you know, I consider that I've been in this game for a number of years, probably over 20 now. A lot of my consultant team that we employ to provide professional advice to the council have been involved in infrastructure projects in excess of 10 or 15 years. And we have all consistently said the same thing, that the plans are very, very difficult to understand. It is something that we've brought to your attention many times in advance of consultation. It's something that's been documented and noted. And it's a problem because of the scale of the scheme, but it's a problem that sits entirely with Highways England, because it is your responsibility to make sure that those people you are consulting with have the information they need to understand what the scheme is about and what the impact on them is going to be. And I'm afraid on that, with the materials that you provide, I think Highways England falls far short, to be quite frank. And in the absence of any physical consultation events, I think the ability of residents to understand the impacts of any design changes on this scheme are incredibly limited. And I think that's almost a statement of fact, because I'm struggling. I'm not saying that should be a bar by any stretch of the imagination, but having been involved in this sort of work for 20 years and being used to looking at infrastructure schemes and plans, if I'm struggling, I would consider that somebody like my mum, who would be consulted on a scheme, wouldn't know where to start, frankly.
Yeah, Anna, I've on the time that I've been on this scheme, I'm aware of the issue around how it's been presented, and it certainly is a difficulty, because as you said and as you know, if you put a consistent north arrow in there, you'll end up with hundreds of sheets, and effectively you'll be asking people to jigsaw piece the sheets together, and that wouldn't work particularly well. So what we've tried to do is set it out in what we believe is the easiest way to understand that information. But as you said, it is a very complex scheme, and the junctions that we have and the layouts that we have, you know, and the length of the scheme make it complex. So we've tried to do what we believe is the easiest way to present information. But it's noted, and I've heard the previous comments around the North Arrow.
Can I just, Gareth, do you mind if I just jump in on the 2 weeks issue that Laura mentioned? And this is about people who who may have received a letter and that's about their property and the phone number to call. Now, we've got the telephone surgery service that's operating at the moment. I'm certainly not aware of anyone who's phoned that and has had to wait 2 weeks for us to get back to. Most people, the vast majority of people who phone that number, we've been able to schedule a follow-up call by the next day. So if there are people who want clarification about what's happening with their property, certainly the best way to do that is to phone us and speak to one of the members of our team. And I certainly wouldn't expect them to have to wait 2 weeks to have a response.
Could I ask, is it standard process if they email the info email address for, I won't name anyone because I know we're not meant to do that, the usual person who does respond to those emails to do so when it's specifically directed at the land and property team? Or should that go to land and property to respond? Because the response that certain person responded was not what I'd call a satisfactory response. I mean, I'll take this obviously off the forum anyway, but out of interest, if the query goes through to info@, and it's directly related to a property letter that's been sent out, will that be forwarded to land and property, or will it go to the general info correspondent?
It depends. It depends on the individual email, to be honest, Laura, because it depends on the nature of that inquiry. But we'd be very happy to take this up offline if there has been an issue that you've spotted.
Numbers of them. I will be doing it, and I have done it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to give the chance for Councillor Allen to speak, and then everyone's had a chance to speak after the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Gareth, the basics of your delivery this evening have revolved around design refinement. So I can touch on design first. I mean, I don't know how many times I've asked probably yourself and Highways England's representatives to get this right by design, so it does lessen the long lasting impact on residents' health. Because once this motorway is going to be built, it's most certainly, I think we can say, it's going to be there for the next 100 years. So I think the major concern for people that live in the area is on the lasting health impact. Now, are Highways England going to realise that it is, as I've suggested many times before, a toll road? So the overall cost of this whole scheme will be repaid tenfold. You will get your money back time and time again for this project, because really it's a bit like the current crossing we've got at Dartford. It's a cash cow. It generates huge amounts of money, and I don't know if you can remember when we were first graced with the first tunnel, and then followed by the second tunnel, and then followed by the bridge, but we were promised the same thing again and again. Once it was paid for, it would be free. Can anyone remember that? Okay, and that hasn't happened because simply it is a cash cow. So I'll go back to reminding Highways England again that this is a toll road. So you should be getting this whole scheme right by design. That's what we're asking you. If you are going to put this scheme on us here in Thurrock, impact Thurrock further with this scheme, you need to get it right by design. And I can only alliterate the Councillor Rice, how many times he's said it. And then there's been very little talk about cut and cover. I think the gist of it, you Highways England are actually saying that it is the public purse that's going to be paying for this. But again, it will return through tolls. what are you going to do to lessen that lasting health impact? Because you need to be doing something. Can some of that money that's charged on tolling be put straight into the health of the people of Thurrock? Because it's certainly going to be affecting the people's health in Thurrock for many years to come. So I'd suggest that a large amount of that tolling that you receive from it, after it's paid, it goes straight back into the NHS perhaps and looks after people's health.
Okay, picking up on on those couple of points in terms of the tolling and how the DFT and the government spend that money. Clearly, that isn't within my gift or remit to comment on that. As you said, it is a toll road. The business case that's being finalised now set out the reasons why it is a toll road in terms of how that income will be used and when the scheme will be paid for, and I should pick it up. And in terms of the phrase right by design, as you say, we will need to demonstrate that the preferred route is the correct preferred route, and that the design that we've done from the preferred route to our what we'll call our DCO submission design that is taken due consideration of the impacts on residents. And again, this is fully aligned in terms of our we'll have a health impact assessment as part of the environmental statement, along with all the other chapters that I've mentioned, that will set out what the impact of this scheme will be. So that will clearly set out what the impacts are, both in the short and the long term.
Surely, though, Gareth, it's going to be a damning report that we receive, of the overall impact that it's going to have, not only through the construction levels, but for when it's completed, and then we have, say, let's say as many as 160,000 vehicles using it daily, and that's in an area that's already, in terms of air quality, very poor. And again, I'll go back to what Councillor Rice says. We've got the highest levels of COPD, I think, for many miles, in terms of, probably very close to London, so we talk about, if there's any redesign, I think the redesign should be a different option. And like Councillor Rice again said, that, perhaps further east at Canvey, but again, we're looking from a mile crossing at Tilbury to a 2-mile crossing at Canvey, because as we know, as you go further east, the estuary gets, it gets wider. But I think, again, we'll just come back to Highways England and government just trying to do this cheaply, and the cheapest possible option, not really looking at the lasting health impact that it's going to have on the people of Thurrock.
Yeah, certainly. If I could respond on that, part of the examination we're going to have to demonstrate, as I've said, that the scheme is in the right location, and I genuinely mean this. The DCO consenting process, such as any consenting process, is the last opportunity for the scheme to be publicly examined and everything about that scheme questioned, and we will have to set out why we have the route that we have, and the location that was picked, and that will need to be clearly demonstrated during that examination process.
It would just seem that, put it on Thurrock, they're a dumping ground, and let Thurrock have some more of it,
Chair, I don't know.
I think the feeling of the task force are all feeling quite similar. I think there's a question from Councillor Muldowney online.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Councillor Allen, for your question. Mine leads on from there. Obviously, I have heard you saying that the health impact assessment will be part of the DCO examination process. So that's fine. But my question is, given that as a task force, we were fundamentally set up to look at the health impacts of this scheme, when might we expect a health impact assessment update? Not maybe the final document, but get some kind of idea, because obviously residents are coming to us, they're worried about the health impacts. You know, residents already have COPD, which we do have the highest rates outside of London, as Councillor Rice has said, and other respiratory and coronary problems that are potentially going to be made worse by a 6-lane motorway. I know that we're not going to get, it doesn't sound as if we're going to get the air pollution assessments updates until DCO, but can we at least have an update of the health impact assessment while this consultation is going on, so we can at least be answering those questions that are coming from our residents? Thank you.
Okay. In terms of when we're going to share it with the public, and unfortunately, it is going to be that the DCO application is going to be the first time it's in the public forum. And I wonder whether Anna will know the answer. Have we shared it with your officers yet, Anna, in terms of the health impact assessment?
Health impact assessment will not be made available until the environmental impact assessment is concluded, and at that point then the health impact assessment will be concluded, and therefore we will not know the outputs from the health impact assessment until the DCO submission, which is rather reinforcing the point that's being made by members, which is that, you know, a DCO process is supposed to be iterative and collaborative. And it may be iterative, but from where I'm sitting, it doesn't feel particularly collaborative.
I mean, what is the point of doing all this consultation if we don't have the information as we're going along? We're not getting the updated information to actually tell us what are the, you know, whether these concerns that residents have are real concerns, or whether there's nothing to worry about actually, or even to be able to feed in where there are, you know, the evidence is there that there are real concerns, that there are going to be mitigation put in place so that we can reassure our residents on that respect. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me the way this process is working.
I can sense the frustration in terms of knowing absolute detail as early as you can in the timeline,
or any detail, and
unfortunately that doesn't exist at this moment in time. It is a work in progress. We do pull everything together quite late as the scheme nears completion for the DCO application itself. So it isn't a case of we're sat on this information and we're not sharing it with you. It's a case of we're developing it. Our reports are a work in progress, and they're being progressed through our review process and being checked and signed off before we submit. So it isn't a case of we're deliberately hiding things. It's a case of the work isn't complete, and as soon as it's complete, it'll be pretty near to the DCO application, and it'll be submitted as part of that.
Chair, if I can just come in there, we have written formally and documented well our concerns about this concertinaed approach to scheme development, should we say, that means that everything, well, it's like the number 7 bus. They all come at once, don't they? And it kind of feels rather rushed to me in terms of sharing information with us. And we have been told categorically we will not know what the health impact assessment outcomes are until DCO submission. So we're not going to have any of the feedback that you are quite rightly seeking, Councillor Muldowney, so that you can inform residents of the true impacts of this scheme, unfortunately.
It's also very hard for this group to scrutinise what is essentially our main aim, you know, our main reason for being, and that is the health impacts of this scheme on our residents.
Yeah, and actually once the DCO is submitted and the application is submitted, it's very much the case that the colours are rather pinned to the mast at that point in time. So the ability to influence and change is much reduced. And we all need to be acutely aware of that fact. So it's a dissatisfactory situation all round, frankly.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, if I could, I've got a
Gareth.
Anna, have you got some questions, Gareth?
I've got two questions that I'd like to ask, and I'm going to take you back to first principles and back to the beginning of your presentation. And unfortunately, at this point, you'll probably put your head in your hands because I'm going to quote the words back to you, which is also always disappointing, isn't it, when people do that to you? But firstly, you talked about, and I quote, a massive improvement that LTC was going to deliver. You talked about economic growth, and I've got a question related to that because I'd like to understand, and I'm sure members of the task force would like to understand, what the massive improvement is that you refer to for Thurrock. That's the first question. And secondly, in terms of economic growth, you will have been aware of the economic impact report that we produced and published in February, which demonstrated quite the opposite, that actually for Thurrock, the economic growth impacts of this scheme were negative, not positive. So I think our members would be quite interested in understanding what those two benefits are that you seem to allude to that seem to escape the task force. And actually, it's not a new debate. It's something that we ask on a regular basis and don't seem to get a satisfactory answer to. And the second question I've got for you is you talked about views. You talked about the earthworks and improved views. I'm just keen to know who the improved views are for, because Highways England seems to have had an emphasis on the road user previously. And of course, Thurrock's position is one of what the impact and improvements and benefits are for the residents. So those people that are living in close proximity to the Tilbury Viaduct, in Chadwell St Mary, where they're within a few hundred metres of a road, which at the moment is just countryside and fields. So it's what are those views and how are they improving for Thurrock residents, and what is the massive improvement and economic growth for Thurrock that you refer to?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Anna. Picking up those questions. The benefits when, and as you said, I did make a statement about the scheme as a whole, which you'll appreciate. In terms of the benefit for Thurrock themselves, and apologies, I'm aware of your of the document that you produced in terms of setting out what the disbenefits are, and in terms of our scheme, certainly there will be benefits for Thurrock. The scheme as a whole, and again the scheme as a whole, obviously we have a benefit cost ratio that shows that the benefits, which include all the economic and growth benefits, outweigh the cost. So at the highest level, our BCR is above 1. Our benefit cost ratio was above 1, which shows that there are benefits there. In terms of the exact benefits for yourselves, in truth, I think we probably need to set out what the potential benefits are for yourselves. We may well have done that.
If you could do that, that would be absolutely brilliant, because we've been asking for it for the 2 years I've been in post and we haven't received it. So I welcome that. So can we have a commitment that Highways England is going to set out what those benefits are for Thurrock? Because so far we haven't seen.
I will look to see. I will look to see what's available that I can share with you. And if it's readily available and we're able to do so, and I'm permitted to do so, I will share that with you.
Members, I don't have confidence in that response, I'm afraid.
Yep, noted there. But I'm not. But similarly, I'm not going to promise something that I can't deliver. So I need to understand what it is I can and can't do before I will say, yes, you can have that. And clearly I'm in no position to do so.
Okay, so is there an opportunity? So you've done a cost-benefit exercise, a BCR exercise for the whole scheme. And I think everybody on the task force will agree that this scheme delivers benefits for Kent, benefits for wider Essex, benefits for the East Anglian region, even benefits up to the East Midlands because it improves journey times between, Dover and the East Midlands. We can all agree with that. But what's the cost benefit ratio for Thurrock? Because I'd be interested to know if you could do a breakdown of that exercise just to understand truly what the impacts are on Thurrock.
As I said, I won't be able to do a benefit cost ratio for Thurrock, but in terms of setting the benefits out, and it may be more qualitative than quantitative, but I'd look to share that information. I'd look to see if that information is available, and if it is, I'd certainly look to share it with you. And in terms of the earthworks and the views, as you rightly say, generally the views are not, in this case for the road user. The comment that you're picking up on was one I made around the North Portal. And the access that residents will have to viewpoints above the North Portal. So that is very much a local amenity for local residents as opposed to a road user's amenity.
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay.
Please, Councillor Rice had a question.
Yes, Gareth, obviously there is disquiet about this scheme and we understand where you're coming from. I think it would be most useful, Gareth, if you were to supply to every member of the task force by email, and including Laura, the details of how people can get their properties brought. Because it's abundantly clear tonight you're not prepared to mitigate the environmental impact to this scheme that will, whether you're in Ockington, East Tilbury, Chapel St Mary, Alsett Heath, Stifford Clays, part of Grays, it's going to affect the whole borough. And I think it'll only be fair if you could give us those details so that we can distribute them to our residents and so they can inquire how Highways England will purchase their properties so they can run away from this borough, because this will be an environmental disaster. And also, I'd like to seek an assurance from you that your hours of operation would be from 7 to 7, not 7 to 10 o'clock in the summer, because that would be very unfair for the residents that are left. And furthermore, Councillor Allen did touch on it, and Laura did. Residents in Kelvedon Road have suddenly, in Tilbury, suddenly got letters saying that their properties are now encapsulated in this scheme. I think at the very least you owe an explanation to those residents, and you should write to them and point out to them how they are affected so they can be at least reassured that the effect is minimal. But I would be intrigued if you can give that information, particularly the right to have people's properties purchased by Highways England. And finally, Gareth, perhaps you can just tell us the cost of this development. Is it still 8 to 10 billion pounds?
Okay, there's a few questions there. Let's pick up on the cost one first. The figure is, bear with me for 1 second, and I'll get the precise figure for you. I don't want to quote something that is not correct. It's we estimate that the project will cost between 6.4 to 8.2 billion. So that's the cost one. in terms of the purchase of properties, obviously there is, and I appreciate what you're saying in terms of, some of that was on a wider thing. But in terms of those properties are immediately affected. If they think that they're unable to sell their property, obviously the Highways England does have a blight process for those that are believe that impacted. For the majority of the properties, it wouldn't apply, but certainly there is a process there to be followed if they think they're impacted. In terms of the statement around the environmental impact and it not being mitigated, no, apologies again if it came across that way. Where we can, we will obviously look to mitigate, but there will no doubt be some residual environmental impact. The environmental statement will set out. And the working hours, I'll need to take this away. Obviously, I'm not in a position to commit to any working hours in this forum. Our programme would be based on that, and obviously it also set out agreeing certain criteria with the local planning authority, yourselves in this case, in terms of the noise levels of certain construction activities and working hours. So all those will be firmed up with yourselves, but I'm currently not in a position to say yes, it will be between 7 and 7, because obviously you'll need to look at each location at its particular merits in terms of the impact on local residents, the work that's being done there, the noise of the work that's being done there, etc., etc. But as Anna will probably confirm, we'd look to get agreement with yourselves in terms around those the level of noise.
Gareth, I can tell you now, we're not going to agree to those hours of operation. And that's our concern, in that we're not going to agree on those hours because of the impacts on our residents in particular locations especially. And we won't have the final say, members of the task force, on what those hours are, because it will be left as a matter for the DFT to determine. So we don't actually have any control over it. And that is one of our key areas of concern. So, you're not going to address that for us now. We've had a conversation about hours of operation before. We've raised concerns about the time of year. Our officers in technical meetings, I think there was something like 4 weeks of the year we worked out where our residents would have peace and quiet on a Sunday afternoon. It's unbelievable, unacceptable, and we don't have the control. So if you're going to give us a commitment that we can have control over those hours of operation, then we'd welcome that. But I'm not sure that you've got the authority to do that.
And that's clearly not what I said.
Well, I'm just putting a marker down that we are not going to agree to the hours of operation that you're currently proposing, which is 7 until 10 in summer months. Let's be clear about this. Summer, you say, starts in March and finishes in November, and there's an hour start up and an hour shutdown. So in effect, we have no control for our residents over hours of operation between the hours of 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. between March and November. And that, I'm afraid, is the nub of it, that our residents are going to have to put up with that for 6 years during your construction programme, and you think that's acceptable. So my question to you is, would you want to live in a house in Baker Street near the A13 for 6 years while that's going on? Because I surely wouldn't.
And coming back to what I said earlier, the personal impact of this scheme on people's property, on the people that live in there, on your constituents is significant, and I am fully aware of that. It's a huge personal impact, and any loss of property is massive. Any impact during construction is varies from a significant inconvenience to less of an inconvenience. So I am aware of the impact that the building a scheme of this nature does have.
And Gareth, you might be aware of that, but I know from personal experience, having attended consultation events, that there are a number of residents who have been misinformed about that. And they've been told that it'll all be mitigated, it'll all be fine, there won't be any construction impacts, there won't be any dust, there won't be any noise. And I'm not sure that various members of the team have been as honest perhaps as they could be in explaining the impacts of the scheme in terms of construction. My personal view is actually that the construction period is going to be worse than the operation period on this scheme. And I'm not sure that message is being conveyed to our residents such that they can respond appropriately to consultation.
Okay, obviously I can't comment on what other members of the team. I would be surprised if any members of the team were misleading anybody, because obviously the team is pretty well briefed before they go on these consultation exercises, and it certainly isn't the intent to do that, or I would certainly hope it wasn't the intent to do it. And if you could give us some examples of that, certainly I'd look to take those away and feedback to you on that outside this forum. And I've got to be honest, I do agree with you. The construction of this scheme is a huge endeavour, and is going to be, you know, for some of the people, is going to be the bigger impact than the operational phase.
I think I appreciate your candour on that, but I'm sure between myself and Laura Blake we can give you countless examples of. I've heard it myself, and I can even give you the names of the members of the team that have provided misinformation to residents because I've overheard it myself directly. I'm sure Laura Blake's in the same situation.
Yes, this is Laura Blake, and I can guarantee I can give plenty of examples, and I actually experienced it and witnessed it myself firsthand on numerous occasions at various locations by various members of your team.
Okay, if you could share information with that would be great. Thank you. Obviously, I can't comment any further on that because I would need to look into that.
I've shared these details a number of times as inadequacies, and nothing is ever done, and no one ever comes back to us.
Okay, it was Councillor Rice's question originally, so I'll just let him finish with that.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. Gareth, I do appreciate it's a very interesting evening for you. Very hard evening because you're the sole representative fending off all these questions. But I did actually ask if you would be so kind to email the statutory way that Highways England purchase properties from blighted residents. And I think if you could provide that to all the members of the task force, we represent a lot of people, and I think it's an important request, then we can pass that information on. Most people do not look at websites, and I think you must realise that by now. And the other thing I would like, email to all the members, is how people register to actually express their opinions at the public inquiry, because I understand that you have to register for that. And I'm sure there'll be thousands of people that would like that opportunity. And again, because the members of the task force must represent at least, if I look around, at least 60 to 70,000 people, and we can disseminate that information to people so they have a chance to actually share in this project of yours, and also have the chance to go to a public inquiry and put their points across to the inspector, because obviously if residents will feel that strongly and they do register, I'm sure the inspector will take on board their concerns. So if you could get those two requests out, one is the purchase of properties to all the members, and secondly how residents actually register to go to the public inquiry and speak, so that all members can give that information to their residents. I would be extremely grateful, Gareth.
Councillor, if I can just come in on the procedural matter that you're referring to, because we have had an exchange of correspondence about this before. So the process, and we did a training exercise on DCO process a while ago, if you remember, and I issued slides on that. So with regard to the registering as an interested party to make representations to the examination in public, the Planning Inspectorate does not have jurisdiction for this matter at the moment. It will not have jurisdiction for the matter unless and until a DCO application is made and is accepted. So based on the current programme that Highways England are working to, the application is not going to be accepted until November, December time at the earliest. At that point, Highways England will have to write to all interested parties to let them know that they have an accepted application. And then it will be open to members of the public to register with the Planning Inspectorate as interested parties. Now, on that, the Planning Inspectorate's website has a registration facility where residents can register now to provide updates on the project and where it's up to. So at the point an application is made, they would be notified. At the point an application is accepted, they would be notified, which would give them advance notice of when they need to register as an interested party. Above and beyond that, the council will be issuing press releases and press statements along and in parallel with that process. So we will be making sure that we publicise it as well. So at this point in time, the best thing that residents can do is to go on the Planning Inspectorate's website, and I sent you the link to it in an email several weeks ago. The best thing that people can do is go onto that website and register their email address to receive notifications about the application. That is going to be far more reliable, believe me, than anything Highways England would do, frankly.
Thanks for the sharing of confidence in our ability there, Anna. I was just going to say absolutely the right thing. But in terms of, would you like us to share as Anna said, the Planning Inspectorate website does have some good material on there, and we can certainly pull something off there and share it with you that gives a sort of simple introduction to the process. And we can again, it's not our work. It's the Planning Inspectorate work, and it is pretty well presented in terms of the process. So certainly, if you're happy for me to do so, we'll certainly share the blight with yourselves and an inspected website, if you're happy to do so.
Be very happy to receive that information, Gareth, or anything else. And Anna, if you could share with me those details, if they're not exactly the same ones that Gareth's going to share with us. And
I'll do it right now. I'll do it right now, Councillor Massey.
Now going to take it, see if there are any questions online.
Laura, do you wish to ask a question?
Yes, please. Can I ask, you were mentioning about the hours for construction, which obviously we have seen and we're very aware of and we're very unhappy about. I have particular residents in the Thurrock borough that have been told on more than one occasion at events that where they are potentially, they could have construction work 24/7. Can you pass any comment on that, of whether there will be any work going on through the night or?
Without knowing the precise location, obviously I can't comment on, but generally on a scheme of this nature, there will be certain works that will need to be done during the night. There's the need to lift bridge beams in, the need to do certain road closure work.
Have we lost Gareth, or has he finished?
I think we've lost Gareth. Sorry, let me message him.
I think maybe he's had enough.
I knew he'd regret saying that he could be here as long as he wanted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
It's at the pub, Gareth.
Right. And unfortunately, I was going to say the pubs have only opened a week ago in Wales, so there's still a big queue. We still got the novelty factor. Did you hear any of my response?
Not really. We heard.
It's a shame. It was the best one I've done tonight. So I'll have to rework it. Yeah, in terms of 24-hour working, yes, you know, the scheme of this nature, there will be certain elements that will need to be done at night. You know, the generally, you know, the health and safety, the closing of some of the roads will need to be done at night. Lifting in of bridge beams, certainly diversion works, you know, certain utility works, because you need to work in a safe manner. You can expect on a scheme of this nature there will be some nighttime working.
So it's even worse than the hours we expected. So that's good that we've got some clarification that it's even worse than we'd been told and expected previously. Also, with regard to the landform that you were mentioning, I believe that's the correct terminology for the extra dirt that you're going to build up around the northern portal. Can you tell me what consideration you've given to safety and security with regards to people having access so close to the portals? And also, does it mean that if you're dumping all of the dirt there, that there will be less vehicle movements during construction? And if so, by how much, and where can we see those figures, please?
Yeah, certainly we're not dumping material. It's the reuse of material, absolutely, that we're winning on site. But it does have, we firmly believe it has amenity value. In terms of providing an area that people can use for walking, which provides long distance views. And does it reduce the amount of material needs to be moved off site? Absolutely. Reusing material on site does mean that it doesn't go onto the existing road network, which is obviously a positive there. In terms of the quantum of that, I haven't got that information to hand, but you know, we would know what that earthworks was there. So that's that point. And what was the other point? Sorry.
Have you considered the safety and security? And if you don't have that information to hand about the reduction, could you please provide that to us all?
In terms of the safety and security, yes, clearly we have an obligation under health and safety legislation that when we design something, it needs to be safe in terms of, one, safe for the public to use, and two, we need provision in it to stop people accessing things like the tunnel. And clearly our fencing and security strategy will set out how we control people's movements so that they're not tempted to do anything daft around the tunnel.
I think my question for that comes from the fact that when you're looking at the visual, which is obviously from a great distance in the new consultation material, there is no sign of any kind of fencing or mention of it. And if you are putting something up there, it just leads us to wonder what would it be, and visually would that then have a different impact again if it's any kind of fencing that is going to be blocking people getting through? Is that going to affect things visually as well?
It certainly, obviously, the views are to the southeast and the west, whereas the fence would likely be, in this perspective, would be stopping you getting towards the tunnel.
Again.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, but apologies, I've dropped my video out to see if that'll improve it. I don't know why. I don't think there's anybody else working in the house at this time, so it should be working fine. Yeah, as I was saying, at that location, the views are to the south, to the east, and the west. Obviously, the tunnel is to the north, and so the fencing will effectively be to the north of that. So we shouldn't have an impact on those views.
So residents in the local area in East Tilbury Village could have a visual impact of a fence along their outlook, presumably, is what you're saying?
Laura, if I can just come in there, Gareth, because I might be able to help, because the task force all know that I was involved in the A303 scheme. And on the A303 scheme, a fence was proposed, but it was post and rail. So it was less visually intrusive than anything. On the spoil disposal, actually, the council welcomes. There's one thing that we can probably agree. One few things that we can probably agree on with Highways England about changing the landform in that location and creating something of value for the community, some decent open space by reprofiling the land and using the chalk spoil. But irrespective of that, there are enough extant permissions in sites north of the river to take all of the spoil material, irrespective of what we want them to do with it. So actually, some of the discussions we're having with Highways England is about how it can be used for the benefit of residents rather than just being used to restore kind of mineral sites that are poorly restored at the moment. So I think if there's, coming back to the point we made before about benefits, actually spoil reuse from the tunnel arisings is one of the very limited few benefits that I can actually see from this scheme. So don't take that to mean that we agree with the scheme, Gareth, but we're just saying I was one of the benefits.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's a good point and well put in terms of I fully understand, you know, we're talking at different levels of acceptance here. You know, you have fundamental issues with a scheme, but in terms of able to work together to do some minor things within those constraints, then this is one that benefits both parties.
I think my theory behind it comes from the fact that, yes, initially it looks great and it will be nice on the fault-to-fault walk to have that as an additional feature, if you want to call it that. But when we consider that a lot of the issues we have with closures at the current crossing, sadly, especially in more recent times, or maybe it's become more aware because of social media, are sadly people wanting to jump from the bridge. If we have access for public to be potentially doing anything like that or any other security or safety risks, is that then going to become the case that we then have issues and the traffic backs up on the Lower Thames crossing and we end up with the same problems as we do now when the bridges closed for such incidents? Because obviously that is not a positive if we're enabling potentially upsetting and disturbing issues like that to happen.
Unfortunately, for the exact reason that you've said, we do consider the risk of suicides within the scheme and whether people would look to use, you know, statement areas to do so. So that is, as I said, it's not a pleasant subject, but it certainly is something that's considered as part of our scheme.
That's good to know, because when we saw the pictures, initial reaction was, yes, it looks nice, but what would those potential and other potential impacts be on it? And if there was a fence put in place, would it then have a visual impact for local residents?
Okay, thanks.
May I have one more question just on the path?
I think Gav's covered it. I think tonight we've had some really interesting debate. I'm quite aware of it's now 12 minutes past 9. So if anyone's got any final short points they'd like to make before we move on to the final two agenda items, that'd be fantastic.
Laura, do you wish to make a final point?
It was just a very quick question, hopefully, on the footpath situation where, Gareth, you said that you were not going to do the one that would potentially have gone under the A13 because it brings it too close to the Lower Thames crossing. Yet the one slightly further north to that has now been moved closer to the Lower Thames crossing. Can you quickly or try and explain to us why one of them it's not acceptable to do because it will be too close, yet the other one you're moving it closer to because it looks as close to as the other one would have been had you have gone ahead with it?
Certainly, we've changed the land that we're looking to seek there. So we were able to mitigate the one by moving what land we needed. So we weren't taking the open space. So we didn't need that connectivity.
If that one can now be that close, why can't the one that was going under it be as close? The reason you said you're not doing it is because of how close in vicinity it would be to the LTC. So if the northern one can be, why can't the other one?
It's because we were able to remove the need for the link by changing the land that we were taking. So it was no longer separated. So the open space is no longer separated. So we didn't need that connectivity. So it was easy to mitigate.
I'll take that up later because I'm not sure that I'm really understanding what you're saying. So I won't push for that anymore.
I don't think Gareth said that it was something about its proximity to the Lower Thames crossing.
The consultation materials give that very reason. They say that it's because of the vicinity of how close it was to the LTC that it's decided that it should no longer happen. And then it goes on just a paragraph or two further on from that to say that the one further north would actually be moved closer. So it kind of contradicts itself that you're saying that the one that was due to go under is not happening because it was too close, but now we're moving the other one closer to it.
It no longer connects, as I said, the one that is no longer there. We did discuss how pleasant and how much it would be used. And when it was suggested that just by not having the land use separated by that structure, by having it somewhere else, we removed the need for that link. So it certainly was part of the process that came to that conclusion.
I just find it hard to believe that it could be because of the people not wanting to use it because of the enjoyment, yet you're trying to sell us on the fact that the wooded area that's in a complete triangle surrounded by the A13 and the LTC and slip roads is something that you consider to be a positive and a benefit. Yeah,
too subtly different. We could debate this, and I understand what you're saying, but the one is totally, they are subtly different. The one was a shared space that was immediately adjacent to a busy trunk road under a bridge that we felt, as I said, we could design out, whereas the other one is a far more open space, admittedly, with woodland. Again, if you wanted to pick it up separately, by all means.
Yeah, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John, you promised you have a very small question, was it?
A quick double-barreled question, if you don't mind, Chair. First one being, whilst it's under construction, the tunnel, will the coastal path still be open for walkers to access from, say, the World's End, Tilbury, up to Coalhouse Vault? And also, would you say you'll receive extreme difficulty whilst digging for the tunnel, whilst you're going through the Victorian tip at Surridge's?
Councillor Allen, if I could just come in there, because we've got an issue with the Two Forks Walk now currently as a consequence of rain and flooding. I think it might have been even September, October last year, that part of the seawall and sea defences there have washed away. So currently there is no link between the two forts. There is a footpath diversion in place, and part of the legacy scheme work that we are talking to Highways England about is about using some of the tunnel arisings to repair that sea defence wall to reinstate that footpath. Had it not been for the sea defences being breached, I still think there were issues with that coastal walk as a consequence of Tilbury 2. And the chances are that would have been opened at some point just prior to LTC starting construction. So I don't think the solution to that is entirely within Highways England's gift, if I'm being entirely honest with you. But it is something that officers are aware of, and it is something we're working on.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Obviously, that's picked up on the first question, and the second question was regarding the tunnelling. I didn't quite pick up the.
Going tunnelling through Old Surridge's, which is a Victorian tip.
And you,
Gareth, it's right on the river front. I think at that point,
right, okay,
you are way below the tip, and the construction methodology, Councillor Allen, means that there is a concrete box essentially being constructed north of that location. So although there are boreholes and testing being undertaken in that vicinity to understand what is in the ground, I think the TBM is way below the tip at that point.
Thanks, Anna, for that fine response.
Councillor Rice has one last point.
Gareth, just for the information of members, can you confirm to us the tunnelling at Tilbury, will that be a 24-hour operation?
Yes, the tunnelling is anticipated to be a 24-hour operation.
Thank you, Gareth, for staying tonight. I don't think there's any more questions on. No more questions. Thank you for your time. I think we'll agree to disagree. Will be the spirit of this evening. I think we've got quite a few questions, and there's lots of things we'll be in touch with going forward. I think it's a shame that the next time this task force meets, the consultation date of expiry would already been up. It ends a few days apart. So I would encourage all residents to engage with the consultation, make your views heard, because this may be one of the last chance to do so. It's really important. I think the last consultation is one of the biggest things in Thurrock ever, happening in the middle of one of the biggest things in the world, which is bad luck for us, unfortunately, but it's being lumbered on us. Really need to make sure we make our voices heard, our views heard, because there may not be another chance to have that conversation. Gav, I didn't expect to respond to that essentially, but you're free to go. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks everybody. Thanks, Chair. I completely agree. This isn't about trying to force something to happen. This consultation really is, about getting responses. And I'll reiterate, the examination itself is the ultimate business case of this.
Moving on to agenda item 9, the task force priorities list. This is found in pages 15 to 34 in the minutes. I'm not going to run through each page, but if I'm going to invite members inside the chamber to make comment, and then online, if there's anything, hopefully you've already read this in advance, so just putting it out there to the chamber now.
Just noted, Chair.
And online. Okay, so the task force priority list remains as it is. Agenda item 10, the work programme for 2020-2021. It's found on the last page of the agenda. Would any member inside the chamber like to make comment on that?
Chair, would it be possible for Highways England to come to our meeting, perhaps in the September meeting, when we're out of this problem with COVID-19, so we can actually see their eyes?
Chair, if I can...
In the chamber, we can certainly invite them. I'm not sure if Gareth will want to make his way over, you never know. But yes, we can get, based on whatever happened with the government advice at the time, we'll look into that. Are there any other comments on agenda item 10, the work programme for the task force? Nothing online either?
Nothing on the work programme.
Right, okay, at 9:22 PM, I'll bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your patience and your very good points of view and questions throughout. Thank you. Well done.